Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. So I'm going to get started in a couple of minutes. I want to give people time to tune into this hangout before we get started. And I want to apologize for being late. I planned to originally start this at around 8 o'clock, but because I ended up working at the office longer than expected, this hangout is starting a little bit late. So I hope that you all can bear with me. I hope people are able to tune in. I see that we have a couple of people in here. If you all can let me know if you can hear me okay, I would appreciate it. You can throw up a 1 in the chat room just to let me know that you can hear me fine. I would appreciate it. So I'm going to cover a wide range of subjects. Shout out to Big Game. Can you hear me? Okay, yeah, Big Game can hear me. Thanks for tuning in. And I want to remind people that if you're interested in joining the hangout, please just post your email address in the chat room and I'll email you the link to the hangout so that you all can just join the discussion. Thanks. Shout out to Daryl. Shout out to Norman Edwards. Thanks for tuning in. I appreciate it. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about tonight. The first thing I want to talk about is this Kevin Hart situation. I mentioned I haven't done a video on this yet. I've seen that a lot of people have done videos on it. So I figured I might as well just share my 2 cents about that whole situation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and then I'm just going to get right into it. First, I want to pull up some of the tweets that he put out first. So if you all can bear with me a second, I'm going to turn off my camera and my audio for a couple of minutes so I could pull up these tweets, and then we'll get right into the commentary. Okay, sorry about that. I'm about to share my screen in a second. Shout out to Reigning Woman. Thanks for tuning in. Just give me 1 second. I'm going to share my screen so that you all can see some of these tweets that caused this controversy. Okay, so here's an article from Vice News. It shows some of the tweets, and just so that you all can have some background information, I'm sure that by now, like everybody heard about this situation. Kevin Hart was supposed to host the Oscars, and shortly after he was selected to host the Oscars, there was some controversy about some tweets that he put out years ago. From what I understand, these tweets were like 10 years old. And people brought these tweets up to talk about how he's homophobic, how he's, used some anti-gay slurs. And they were basically saying that action should be taken. And he decided that he was going to bow out of the Oscars. He said, instead of apologizing again for this, he's just going to step aside and not participate in the Oscars because he doesn't want to draw a lot of negative attention to the Oscars. He doesn't want them to focus on his tweets and all that kind of stuff. And he wanted them to just be able to enjoy the Oscars without all the controversy. So he bowed out. And basically he was talking about how he issued apologies before. He had apologized years ago about these tweets. And he was basically saying, well, you know, I've said my apologies. There's no need for me to issue an apology again. And, you know, I'm not going to put myself in a situation where I got to apologize in order to stay with the Oscars. You know, so that's just like a summary of it, you know, paraphrasing, of course. I'm not quoting him verbatim. But this is still, you know, generated a lot of controversy, and some people have come to his defense. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to show some of the tweets that created this controversy. One of the tweets that really bothered a lot of people is his tweet about his son. You know, he said that if his son played with a doll house, he'll break it over his head and say in my end voice, stop, that's gay. So a lot of people didn't like that particular joke. And then there's some other tweets here that he made where he was basically, you know, calling people fags and stuff like that. Like this tweet right here where he said, it isn't funny. You look like a gay version of Chris Brown. Put on a shirt, fag. And then, you know, in this other tweet, he's talking about, you know, that's all gay shit. And he's basically saying, is he coming out of the closet, like joking about somebody saying they're gay? And, you know, he has all these other tweets that say the similar stuff. Let me try to see if I can pull up some of these images. And then he has this tweet right here where he's saying, like, how come you have so many pictures of me in his phone? Like talking about somebody having so many pictures of him in his phone. And as you can see, this is from 2009. Like that's almost 10 years ago. And he said, are you some kind of fat fag that takes pics of small black men all day? So that's one tweet. Then he has this one, you know, he was constantly, you know, making these statements about gay people or whatever. So you get the idea. So I'm going to exit out of this. So that gives you some flavor of the kinds of tweets that he put out. And he was talking about Damon Wayans' profile pic. He said it's like a gay billboard for AIDS. Boom, I'm on fire tonight. So he said these kind of things, these kind of statements and stuff like that. So he's under fire for this. And he said that he's apologized for this before, but yet people are still bringing this stuff up. And he said, well, let me bow out of the Oscars because of this controversy. Now, some people have stood up for Kevin Hart. And, you know, I want to point out a couple of those people. The main one that I want to talk about is Nick Cannon. So let me go to that real quick. And what Nick Cannon did is he went through some famous white female celebrities' Twitter accounts, and he pulled up some old tweets that they put out that were homophobic, you know, that people could say are homophobic, because in these tweets, these women use the word fag in their tweets and stuff like that. But for some reason, because, you know, these women claim that they were using it as a term of endearment and this and that, you know, you have some people in the LGBT community like giving them a pass, basically. You know, basically saying it's like a black person using the N-word, even though it's my understanding that these women are not homosexual or anything like that. They were literally using the word fag, just like Kevin Hart was. But, you know, for some reason, it's a problem when Kevin Hart does it, but these white women get a pass on this. So I'm just going to show you some examples of what we're talking about right here. Like Nick Cannon showed this tweet from this white female entertainer where she's saying, this is what a fag bird looks like when he flexes. And then here's another one this is another tweet from another white female celebrity where she says, I don't mean this in a hateful way, but this new bachelorette's a faggot. And then you have Amy Schumer's tweet right here where she says, I enjoy Skyfall's fags. You know, and then she talks about how she's about to get knee deep in Helen Hunt. So you have these examples of, you know, these other people using the word fag, and you know, they're not being scrutinized to the same degree as Kevin Hart. And in fact, you have homosexual people actually defending their use of the word fag while condemning Kevin Hart. Now, of course, Kevin Hart, like some of his statements were more, like you could say that they were more offensive than some of these statements, but you get the point that Nick Cannon is trying to raise here. And then, you know, there are some other people that have come to Kevin Hart's defense, and I'm going to, you know, provide some examples of those. And one of them is someone that's on Saturday Night Live, and his name is Michael Che. And basically, he talked about how the Academy Award, you know, nominated Mel Gibson for an award just last year, even though Mel Gibson had been, you know, made some anti-Semitic statements, made some misogynistic statements, and actually used the N-word while threatening his girlfriend with rape and physical abuse. But he got nominated for an Oscar. But here you have these people, like, you know, basically trying to crucify Kevin Hart for some statements that he made years ago. And in fact, that he already apologized for. I'm going to get into like my thoughts about some of this stuff in a minute before I, you know, before I close out this segment of this particular hangout. And then, you know, in response to this, people were saying, well, basically, Michael Che was saying, just be, you know, basically saying that, you know, gay jokes are funny and cool. And that's why he's basically, you know, trying to come to Kevin Hart's defense. And then also, what's his name? Charlemagne chimed in as well. He talked about the same type of issues, how basically they were crucifying Kevin Hart over his tweets dealing with homosexuals, but they didn't respond to these other people. And he basically asked, why is that the case? Yeah, so then you have this one homosexual guy who tried to make excuses for, you know, for these women's tweets and stuff like that, basically trying to say that there was a difference between the two, as I was saying before. And you had some other comedians basically say, well, if you're looking for a squeaky clean black comedian, it's going to be hard to find one. And, you know, they cited the example of Bill Cosby as being one of the few black comedians that really have squeaky clean type of humor or whatever. But even with Bill Cosby, because of what's happening with Bill Cosby now, you know, he's been convicted of, you know, sexual abuse and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, they raised that point. And then you also had D.L. Hughley defend Kevin Hart as well, you know, where he basically praised Kevin Hart for not apologizing, and he slammed critics for not being able to take a joke. So that gives you a gist of how people have reacted to this. Now I'm going to stop sharing my screen real quick, and then I'm going to first check in with you all to see where you all are before I provide my commentary. If there are people that are interested in joining the Hangout, please let me know. And I'll email you the link. I'm not going to post it in the chat room because before I had somebody actually go on my live stream and take it over and shut me down and all that kind of stuff. So I'm not going to deal with that again. So if you're interested in joining, just let me know. All right, so let me see who's tuning in. Shout out to David Bowman. Shout out to Fresh and Sassy Plant-Based Living. What's good with you? Yeah, so Plant-Based Living talked about how at first she was happy, but then he folded and apologized. And, you know, so that made, you know, that caused her to have different feelings about the situation. You know, She talked about how like they really do threaten, basically asking, do they really threaten celebrities into submission? Um, and then she talked about how they can use the N word all day in movies and TV. And Ahmed said, Black people are always apologizing. Our people are soft. White people never apologize. They stay on code. You know, they don't, I'm not going to say that they never apologize, because there have been plenty of situations where racist white people have been forced to issue some kind of apology, even though like their apology is insincere and all that kind of stuff. Psycho said, Black people are under attack from the LGBTQ community. I'm sorry, but we can't blame anybody but ourselves for aligning with these confused people. Yeah, so let me. And then you have somebody saying they can't stand these gay ass people. Um, yeah, I can't co-sign that. I mean, I hear your frustration and all that kind of stuff, but let me just go into like what I think about this. There are quite a few comments, and I will try to get to everybody's comments tonight. But there are several things that I want to say. You know, first of all, I appreciate the fact, you know, I understand that this brother, Kevin Hart, like years ago, he already apologized, and that should have been it. Like, you know, that should have resolved the situation. You know, it shouldn't have been, I would think that it shouldn't have been brought up again. Like, if he sincerely apologized, and for the past 10 years, he has not been using that kind of language on Twitter or even in his comedy act, from what I understand. So that should be some indication that he's trying to be more tolerant of different people and their lifestyles and stuff like that. But on the other hand, for those people that are probably just finding out about, you know, these tweets, you know, like some young people or whatever, you know, they didn't know about what happened in the past. They may not have been familiar with these tweets that he put out. And, you know, it may be hard for them to see that kind of stuff. Like people that live that kind of lifestyle, you know, they may be insulted, and it may open up wounds for them. And, you know, they may not have heard about this apology that he issued in the past. And, you know, it reminded me of a video that I did a while ago about this singer, this Latina singer, who, you know, a lot of people liked her music. A lot of people love her music or whatever. But she years ago like had put out some racist tweets about Black women, and people brought those up and raised the issue and talked about it. And I think that if you had a white person, for instance, use the N word in the past on Twitter or whatever, even if it was 10 years ago, I think that we in the Black community obviously would be rightfully outraged. Like if it, for instance, if we didn't know that that person, you know, 10 years ago issued some apology, or, you know, years ago issued some apology, if we didn't know that, and we're like, what's up with this person? Like they're using the N word. And, you know, we would be outraged about that. And if they were to be real dismissive and say, well, I apologized 10 years ago, I'm not apologizing. I mean, I apologized a few years ago, I'm not apologizing again, I'm not addressing it again, I think that we would be rightfully outraged. So in that respect, I understand, you know, where the LGBT community is coming from in terms of like their, you know, their anger towards Kevin Hart for how he initially dealt with the situation. So I get that. You know, I understand why they would have that reaction. And I think that if we put ourselves in their shoes, then we would understand as well, like how, you know, how someone could view that as being dismissive. You know, as someone could view that as being disrespectful and stuff like that. And, you know, so if it was a white person saying, well, I already apologized to you Negroes, why are you bothering me now about this stuff? You know, we would be outraged. We would, each and every one of us would be on our channels ranting against that person, talking about how they should not be hosting the Oscars and this and that. We would be doing that. And to deny that we would be doing that is just to be, you know, in complete denial and to be completely hypocritical. For instance, you have, like, I mean, a lot of these people that are jumping to Kevin Hart's defense are the same people that would probably be condemning a white person that used racial slurs and tried to brush it aside and say, well, I already apologized to that. I mean, we all know that, for instance, D.L. Hughley regularly speaks on racial issues. And that's a great thing that you have a black comedian that uses his platform to deal with race issues. Now, he would be outraged if white people or whatever were dismissive of a white person's racism in a similar type of situation. And obviously, I understand that like this LGBT issue and the race issue are completely different things, and their plight can't, in any substantial way be completely compared to what we went through as a people, slavery, Jim Crow, and all that kind of stuff. But you understand the point that's being raised. And I think that often, people are unwilling to like see that kind of perspective, because they view the LGBT people as like some other, as other basically. And when somebody is other, you can't relate to their situation at all. You can't empathize with them or sympathize with them. And that's the case. And that's why a lot of people are like dismissive of this whole thing. So I kind of understand, why they would be outraged or whatever about like how Kevin Hart initially dealt with it. I get it. And, an apology doesn't take any, I mean, like an apology wouldn't be that big of a deal. Like, to just show that you understand and you empathize with the fact that people are offended and people are hurt by things that you said in the past. This could be analogous to like somebody saying very derogatory things about women or about Jews or some other group that's viewed certain ways in this society, that is stereotyped or whatever. So, I understand this whole thing, and I don't think that people should be dismissive of it. And by understanding, like their outrage or whatever, that doesn't mean that you necessarily agree with the lifestyle that people are living. But at the end of the day, you understand that people are human beings, and, we need to have some kind of compassion towards other human beings and not try to lash out at people and stuff, even if we respectfully disagree with lifestyle choices that people make and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I have to say about that. There is hypocrisy, this whole thing about how these people react to these white women comedians, using that word, calling people fags and stuff like that. And that's the nature of the society. The society is hypocritical all the time. There are always double standards when it comes to Black people. And, that's a disgrace. But we shouldn't use that as some kind of excuse to say we should be, had a right to be just as intolerant and ignorant as these other people do. And all that kind of stuff. It's just like the whole Bill Cosby thing. People is basically saying, well, if you boil it down, some of these people are essentially saying, well, these white men got away with, abusing women and, raping women and, sexually assaulting women. So why can't Bill Cosby do that as well? Why can't he get away with it as well? And I think that there's something wrong with that kind of argument, that kind of position. But my bottom line is this, man. You can't put yourself in a situation where you would be outraged about some old racist tweets that somebody did, but then at the same time, you can't empathize or understand why LGBT people are outraged about, these tweets. Some of these people are outraged. Some of them may not have heard about this stuff. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that, man. And I think that the fact that that they were able to apply pressure on him should be an example of how we need to be organized in our community. The Black community needs to be organized in terms of being able to apply pressure to affect some level of change. Now, I hope that this whole thing doesn't mess up his career. His career is taking off. And, it would be a shame that something like this would derail his career, you know, because of some old tweets and stuff like that. I think that now he's making the, you know, statements to try to mend fences with these people and, you know, try to resolve it. And hopefully this won't be an issue for him in the future, you know, because it'll be a shame that, you know, because of some thought, you know, some tweets that he put out years ago, his career is all messed up or hindered in any kind of way. And it's just like a reminder of how people have to be conscious of, you know, the terminology that they use here on YouTube, you know, in social media, period, not just on YouTube or Twitter, but everywhere. You should be conscious of what you use, what kind of language you use. We've seen examples, like somebody earlier was talking about how white people never apologize and this and that. But there are plenty of examples of these white people who are forced to apologize, you know, after it comes out that they made some racist statement. And even, you know, like a lot of them lose jobs and stuff for racist statuses that they post on Facebook and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and you had one situation I recall where this guy had some company. I can't remember exactly what it was, but he made all these racist comments to somebody, and he wouldn't apologize, and he ended up losing his business because of that. And I think that there should be consequences for, you know, racism, and I can understand why LGBT people would want to have consequences for, you know, people that attack their community. And, you know, that's what people should do. They should organize around whatever their interest groups are and push their agenda. Now, obviously, I've done videos where I've explained my position about like the lifestyle choices or whatever that they make and all that kind of stuff. But despite my disagreement with their lifestyle, I don't think you need, you know, I don't condone, you know, the use of slurs against people. I don't condone discrimination against people because of their sexual choices or whatever. You know, I think that the government and private industry shouldn't be in people's bedroom trying to regulate what people do in their own private spaces. And I think that ultimately, you know, God will be the judge of people instead of like, you know, private corporations and government institutions. So, so that's what I have to say about that. Let me check in with y'all before I go on to the next subject. Shout out to Psycho. Yeah, so Fresh and Sassy said they can use the N word all day. And that I mean, that's a good point. When it comes, I mean, for instance, like black comedians use the N word all day, but it's like I mean, I'm sure like black people use the N word in a different kind of way. It has a different context and all that kind of stuff, even though it's not right. I don't condone the use of the N word, but there's no like outrage about a black comedian, for instance, using the N word or whatever. And, you know, even like somebody was pointing out, I saw a video, I didn't watch the actual video, but I saw the title to a video where they were talking about like Kevin Hart and his colorism. Like he's made a lot of derogatory statements about dark-skinned women in the past. And, you know, people are organizing against him for that. You know, and maybe they should have done so or whatever. But that goes to like the lack of organization or the lack of interest and focus on the issue of colorism. Yeah, so let me see what you all are saying before I move on. Yeah, I don't know. I see Psycho said this week has been more proof than ever that black people need to get off of this social justice crap. I don't know what I don't I don't understand like why people make social justice like some bad thing, like asking for social justice, like, you know, demanding equality. What makes that a bad thing? Like, why is there some negative connotation to being like a quote unquote social justice warrior? I don't understand like why that has such a negative connotation in these spaces in Black YouTube. Like I hear people say that all the time, and the first people that were using that word as an insult, you know, social justice warrior, were these right-wing white conservatives. And it's just funny to see like so many black people here on YouTube, for instance, using that word. And it's like, I understand like what they're saying, like in terms of like coalitions and focusing on all these other groups' issues instead of focusing on our issues primarily. You know, number one, I think that Black people need to focus primarily on our issues and push our agenda. But that doesn't mean that you can't like have any kind of sympathy or empathy towards other groups of people or understand. I mean, the fact of the matter is, you know, any kind, like if we can, like I was saying before, like if we can see um, like the pain that it would cause to for somebody to use racial slurs and be dismissive of our concerns and stuff like that, we should be able to draw some kind of analogy to that situation involving these LGBT people. If we can understand like what it's like to be discriminated in the workplace, being denied promotions and all that kind of stuff, or being fired because of race and all that kind of stuff, why can't we identify with other groups of people that face similar situations based on either their orientation or their racial background or their national origin or other types of discrimination or their gender? And I just think that I don't think that we should be like isolationists in our approach to issues that affect not just the Black community, but other communities. Um, but yeah, I mean, that racism piece is, a very important piece, like these double standards. And that's something that we need to like demand to be addressed. Like if they're going to hold Kevin Hart to the standard, then they need to hold all these other comedians to the standard. That's something that has to be called out. But that doesn't mean that we just say, well, because these other people engage in this activity, then we should be able to. I mean, we should try to be better than these other people instead of using them as our measuring stick or, our barometer as to what the standard is. Yes, hold on one second. This is skipping around. And again, like if people are interested in joining this hangout and discussing this stuff live, we can do that. Shout out to King Hebrew. Shout out to Sam Higgins. Shout out to Kevin Thompson. Let's see. Just bear with me one second. Shout out to Macom. Shout out to Water Sniper. King Hebrew said it's hard for me to take the N word out of my vocabulary. Yeah, so many people use it like so constantly. I mean, because like in our community, it just has a different type of meaning, but you got to go to the origin of the word. Like a lot of times people use the N word for man, the word man, so it's like it's becomes like a word that is frequently used. You hear it in comedy and all that kind of stuff. You hear it in rap songs. Yeah, so Macom said nobody had an issue with Kevin Hart's tweets until the media made an issue. It was over 10 years old. Well, when people found out about him, they had an issue. Like some people may not have known about those old tweets or whatever. Just like, that's like saying, well, nobody had any issue with such and such using the N word on Twitter until the media brought it to people's attention. Yeah, so I mean, that brought more attention to it. But from what I understand, this is not the first time this issue's been raised. Like people talked about it, these tweets before, and he addressed them before and stuff like that. So apparently somebody had an issue with it. King Hebrew said Kevin Hart must have pissed somebody off. Yeah, maybe so, man. Maybe so. Maybe somebody said, well, let's dig this stuff up and let's get him, let's, destroy him or whatever. That's possible. Yeah. And we all know about like Roseanne Barr. That's a good example that Psycho brought up, where she was basically calling one of Obama's former aides, you know, a mix between the what is it, one of those groups, ISIS and Planet of the Apes and stuff like that. You know, basically alluding to black people being ape-like. You know, and obviously we know that there's a legacy of racism that goes along with that. And she was eventually forced to apologize, and she also lost her job and stuff like that. And that was for something recent. That was a recent tweet. That wasn't anything old or anything like that. But yeah, it's like, even if that was something, even if it was a situation where she, for instance, like just speaking hypothetically, said the N-word like 5 years ago and people discovered it on her Twitter. And she was like, you know, and she basically said, well, I'm not apologizing for that. People would be outraged and stuff. So it's like, if you can see that example, then why is it so difficult to see, you know, why some people are outraged about Kevin Hart's thing? Now, do I think that he should have bowed out of the Oscars? Of course not. I think what he should have done is just said, like, just reiterated that he apologized before and he's apologizing again. You know, he didn't mean to hurt anybody or offend anybody, and just keep it moving and going with the Oscars, man. It doesn't take much to just issue an apology. Like, even if you disagree with somebody's lifestyle, you don't have to, you know, use slurs against them or, you know, say derogatory things. And I understand like why he made the statements, like, for instance, like about his son playing with a dollhouse and all that kind of stuff. But it's like it's just like an immature way he is a comedian, but it's an immature way to express yourself and stuff like that. Yeah, because people had a right to like want their children to have certain values or whatever. But it's just the way he expressed himself, you know, which created a problem. Yeah, and I understand. I see that Makeup is referring to this as fake outrage, but it's like if it was a black person, if it was a racist issue or whatever, some issue of racist tweets, and we were to bring it up, and you know, white people would say, "Well, this is fake outrage," we would be debating against those people. We would challenge them and say, "This is not fake outrage," and we would explain why it's not fake. So let's see. Yeah, so that was just one tweet where he was talking about his son. There was other tweets that I showed, and I looked at your program as well, Psycho, and you showed on the screen like all these other tweets that I didn't even show on here. So it's bigger than that whole thing about his statements about his son, you know, possibly being gay. But it's like, even if he didn't want his son to be gay, it's like the way he expressed himself about it, like talking about like basically hitting his son upside the head with the dollhouse or whatever, you know, and, you know, and the obviously offensive things that he was saying. Like, it's one thing to say, well, I want my son to be masculine, I want my son to be heterosexual. It's quite another thing to, you know, go all off and say what Kevin Hart said. You know, I think there's a difference. And your assessment of Kevin Hart as a coon and stuff like that, I get that. And the funny thing is, like, Kevin Hart had these tweets about these gay people, but yet he actually put on a dress and was acting like a woman. You know, so it's like, it's kind of odd that he would put out these tweets about these gay people when he was acting very gay by dressing up like a woman. Yeah, I just I was about to say disrespectfully. No, but I respectfully just disagree with y'all, like, about how he could have handled that whole thing and about the nature of his tweets. Um, oh, okay. So Psycho wants me to send him the link. So let me copy your email address right now and send you a link. Yeah, let me try to do that right now. Just bear with me 1 second. I'm gonna cut off my camera for a second and send Psycho this link. Just bear with me a second, y'all. Okay, Psycho, I sent you the link, so you should have it in a couple of minutes. Shout out to my man Voltron Black. Yeah, man, what you been up to? You haven't posted any videos lately. Let's see. Shout out to Water Sniper. Yeah, get the likes up, man. You know, this should be an interesting discussion. I didn't get a chance to hear all of Psycho's hangout. Just bear with me a second. Yeah, I don't know what's up with that Sandra Bland situation. I'm gonna have to look into that. Hey, what's up, Psycho? I see you here.
Peace. What's going on? Possibility.
Oh, nothing much, man. So, yeah, so I didn't get a chance to see much of your hangout. So I know that you probably have a completely different take on this issue based on what you're saying in the chat room.
Well, yeah, I went in on the LGBTQ community or whatever the case may be. For the most part, you know, I could have took the route of getting on, you know, Kevin Hart as far as this being his quote unquote nigga wake up call, because he do be doing some niche type things, you know, he's been called out for. But I saw the bigger picture here, and I decided to focus on the bigger picture and speak out against this whole gay agenda that is really becoming a serious issue, and people just don't see it. It's it's like, okay.
So what do you mean by gay agenda? Like, what, I mean, do you think like they should be okay? Like, if you were in a community and somebody was insulting your community using slurs against you or whatever, you think that they should just like be silent and say nothing and do nothing about that? Like similar, like if we were in a situation where, for instance, somebody used the N-word in tweets or whatever, or, you know, used stereotypical language about Black people. Obviously, you don't think we should sit back and just ignore that, or like just say, if they were to say, well, hey, those are some old tweets, I already addressed that, you know, I'm not apologizing or discussing that again. Like, do you think we would just sit back and be okay with that?
It would be a group of Black people that would be upset. I'll probably go as far as saying most of us probably would be upset or whatever.
If some entertainer was just like, oh, I used that in the past, that's old news, get over it, you know, quit crying about that, you know, we would be upset, right? I mean, most of us would be upset.
It would be a large portion of us that would be. But there will be a segment that will probably take it a way I would take it, because like if Hulk Hogan came out and it was announced that, let's say he wasn't in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. I think he already was, but they yanked him or whatever. Let's say he was never in it, right? And it just came out that Hulk Hogan was about to go into the Wrestling Hall of Fame. I'm not going to go on this big protest saying, well, he shouldn't go in the Hall of Fame because he made because he made a statement saying he ain't want his daughter messing with no niggas and this, that, and the third and everything else. And he done already gave his little fake apology and did all that little song and dance many years ago. It's like, I don't want to hear another fake apology when he already gave me one years ago. It's like, I'm not going to view this apology 10 years later different than I don't even think it was 10 years. I'm just saying, like, for example, I'm not going to look at that apology different.
So you wouldn't challenge that at all? Like, you wouldn't say, well, he shouldn't get it, or like, or
no,
for instance, like, because you remember that lady?
Because his opinion. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I was gonna say because his opinions about his daughter has nothing to do with his impact in wrestling. You know, so he can go ahead and like, there's a lot of bad people that are in Hall of Fame. You know, like some of the best people in the world is like Lawrence Taylor did all types of foul stuff. He was first ballot Hall of Famer. There's a big issue about Terrell Owens. They held him back about three years. I think they held him over when he should have been first ballot, but they held him over because of attitude and all this other stuff, everything else. But a lot of people say he's not a good person, even though I would argue against that, but a lot of people hold that position about him, and he's still in the Hall of Fame, whatever. It's about what you do on the field or the ring or whatever the sport is. Like if you're getting honored for that. Now, as far as endorsements and stuff like that, that's a little bit different. Then that's when the public perception starts to come into play, because you don't want somebody endorsing your product who was going to turn off a segment of the population, because that's bad business. But if you're talking like Hall of Fames and stuff like that, or just honoring people, yeah, I don't really care.
Yeah, but this is like, I mean, this is similar to what you're talking about with branding and stuff, because it's the Oscars. You know, he's been put in a position to like address, you know, a position of honor, like to be a host of this particular program. And if this was some white person who made racist tweets, you know, even if it was years ago and then they were all dismissive, would you be like, you know, defending their right to host the Oscars or supporting them in their effort to host the Oscars or whatever?
I wouldn't be shocked. I see, and
or even like a Mel Gibson, and
it's kind of I don't like these little black comparisons with the gay stuff, because it's a little bit different ball game, because you're comparing a lifestyle to a way of being. Like, you know, like we are black, whether, you know, like we didn't choose to be black, you know, we've been black our whole lives, you know. When these gay,
yeah, I understand that there are differences. Like, we know that gay people weren't enslaved, we know that they didn't go through Jim Crow and all that kind of stuff. We understand that.
They chose a lifestyle. So I feel,
but the thing is, like, in terms of discrimination, like if you just deal with it from the discrimination aspect, but we have to draw comparisons like slurs. I
don't view him saying.
I mean, it's like, I understand why you don't. I understand your perspective, but the fact of the matter is, like, there's discrimination. Like, you know, there's slurs used against both groups of people. You know,
discrimination is supposed to be like stopping people from doing something. Like him saying that wasn't stopping gay people from getting their rights or anything like that. He didn't speak out against getting gay rights and his other stuff. I remember him having
the same thing could be true if somebody said like for instance, those comments that Roseanne Barr made, or I think that lady's name is Paula Dean, that racist Southern cook or whatever, like all the racist stuff that she did and said, that didn't stop black people from doing anything, but it was like those were slurs that were used that are racist or whatever, offensive. And, you know, I don't think that we would ignore that and stuff like that. So I'm saying, I'm saying that there are differences in terms of the different group, like between gay people and black people, obviously, and our experiences. But, you know, you could say that there's still like some comparisons in terms of discrimination. Now, the whole thing's about like, it's a lifestyle choice. You know, I get that. Like, I understand that. Like, I think that, you know, from my perspective, I view it more as a lifestyle.
Somebody of the Oscars, didn't Chris Rock host the Oscars one year?
Yeah, Chris Rock did host the Oscars.
And Chris Rock got a famous segment in his in one of his stand-ups where he was talking about the word faggot. And he was talking about, and he got all deep into detail about the word faggot, and nobody cared about that when he hosted the Oscars. And the funny thing about that segment when he talked about the word faggot was he was talking about exactly what happened with Kevin Hart. Like, like the way Kevin Hart was using the word faggot in some of those tweets, he was using it in a universal way. Like, because Chris Rock said in his stand-up that and it's true, you don't even have to be a faggot to be called a faggot. You know, like people will use the word faggot universally.
But it's not, but it's never like
it's not like you know, like people will call a straight person a faggot in a minute.
Yeah, like, but it's never like as a like as a compliment. It's an insult. Like it's saying that somebody.
Yeah, but you never hear nobody call a white person nigga as an insult or this, that, and the third. Like, I'm just gonna call this person just a nigga.
Well, you would hear, like, for instance, somebody call somebody a sand nigga. Like I heard, I was watching this video while, a few days ago.
Arabs, yeah.
A black person was calling this, Arab sand niggas or whatever. So people use it against other groups of people, but it still has a negative connotation, a negative connotation to it. So it's like, I understand your point about like how they're different. And then the other point that I was going to make about the homosexual, like from my perspective, it seems more like a lifestyle choice. But then, from the homosexual, like a lot of them believe that, that's how they were born and stuff like that. They believe that they didn't choose that lifestyle, because a lot of them will say, well, if I could make a choice, like I wouldn't, they wouldn't choose to be a homosexual and stuff like that. They wouldn't choose to be, subjected to to discrimination or to being ostracized because of their sexual preferences and all that kind of stuff. So for a lot of them, they don't see it like as, some kind of choice or like lifestyle choice. So that's just like, another thing. And I think that because we're not a part of that group, it's like easier for us to be like, well, that's their thing, their problem or whatever, they're discriminating, them being discriminated against or like being insulted is irrelevant and stuff like that. And the only reason why I draw these analogies is so that we can understand that there are some kind of comparison. Just like if you had somebody making derogatory statements about women or about Latinos or something like that, they would be outraged because if they use like some racial slurs against Latinos or whatever, they would have a similar type of response.
They actually born Latinos and females. You see, once again, like that's a more fair comparison, I think, because it's still comparing the lifestyle to the way you are, like the way you was born.
Yeah, and the thing is, like with the lifestyle thing, like people, like I'm not sure there's any kind of definitive study or anything like that it points out like whether or not it's a lifestyle, just a pure choice that somebody makes, or whether or not like some people may have, because of chemical imbalances or hormonal type of issues, may have these different sexual preferences or whatever. Like I'm not aware of anything like definitive saying, well, it's definitely just a psychological thing.
But they got a thing called dysphoria that they diagnose a lot of these I know these transgenders with.
Yeah, I just don't, I mean, it's like an issue that I think that it's a complex type of issue. Like I don't think it's just a simple thing as like, these people just decide to be, just to be gay or whatever. I don't know that much about it, so I can't really speak on it. But I think that it's deeper than somebody saying just, I'm going to make a choice to live X, Y, and Z. I think it's more complicated than that. Because, like, who would like, I'm just thinking from a common sense perspective, like, who would voluntarily decide to be discriminated against, like, to be, like, viewed as other and stuff like that? Who would choose that for themselves? Like, that's part of the thing that I wonder about with homosexuals and stuff.
In terms of like the whole different ball game is why they would do it. Yeah, I can't tell you, but yeah.
Or like, yeah, just like how they end up in that situation where they're living that kind of lifestyle. It's just like raises a whole bunch of questions.
It
makes me.
You might address one comment in the chat is kind of on topic of what you was talking about before I came in here.
Oh, okay.
Somebody asked me because we was going back and forth about the SJW thing because you had we was talking about it in the chat, and somebody made the assumption that they was I remember you saying something about the SJW thing and it's a conservative term or whatever, and to some degree you're right, like they kind of came up with the terminology as far as like calling it SJW, but SJW was around before the term SJW existed, you know, but you know, so when people say SJW, they kind of just using it as a way just to define who it is that people are actually talking about. But it brought up a deeper conversation because it made me ask, like, well, hold up, like, because I believe his name Future said, if I go back to the exact comment, he said, what did he say? He said he is pro-black, and the reason he said so-called, because I asked him about the term so-called pro-black, which is a pet peeve of mine. But he said is reason why he said that was because conservative ideologies don't work in our favor. And then I asked him, well, you know, is being pro-black a conservative ideology? I blame black first, excuse me, being conservative ideology, because that's one of my main things when it comes to the social justice warrior thing. Is it's kind of hard to be a social justice warrior and be black first, because you got to, because your allegiances is kind of like pulling all different directions, because other people are telling you what you should be concerned about, what you should be outraged about. Okay, it's time to be outraged about this. The gays are going through something. Okay, wait, the feminists are going through something. We gotta be outraged about this. We gotta be outraged about that. And while we spending all this time being outraged over everybody else's problems, our problems are never being solved. So but it made me ask him, and then he bounced back and said, liberal progressive ideology is black first, and I totally disagree with that.
Yeah, so this is what I have to say in response to that. Like, you know, obviously, you know, I think that we should be about promoting our agenda as a people first and foremost. Like, that should be at the forefront of what we are about. But that doesn't mean that we can't form coalitions with others around common interests and, you know, common objectives, you know. And so that's the way I see it. Like, many of the people that were really about that life, about fighting for freedom for Black people, they had a long track record of working in coalitions. You know, people that aren't just about like talking about things like a lot of these personalities here on YouTube, the people that were actually organizing on the streets, the people that were actually confronting the police and dealing with police brutality, organizations like the Black Panther Party. They worked with all types of groups. They worked with
Panther Party is more socialist, though.
Yeah, but I'm saying that they worked with, you know, white workers. They worked with Latinos. They worked with, you know, just different types of people. Yeah. And they were a true revolutionary organization. Like, unlike a lot of these other people who just talk, they actually put in the work. They actually built programs in the community. They fed the hungry. They fed children. They actually, instead of talking about fighting police brutality like a lot of these YouTube personalities do, they actually confronted them on the ground, you know, with weapons. And then a person like a Kwame Ture, you know, one of the people that was instrumental in, you know, SNCC and, you know, got involved with the Black Panther Party. That brother, you know, formed all kinds of coalitions with revolutionary groups. If you look at, for instance, the ANC in South Africa, they had coalitions. They wouldn't have been able to fight against the apartheid regime without ties to Libya and ties to the PLO and other groups, like ties to the Cuban revolutionaries. So coalitions are just a matter of intelligence. It makes sense for different types of people to work together against their common enemies instead of being divided up and, you know, being so narrow in their focus where they really don't, you know, they're narrow, they're isolated, and they're not accomplishing anything. Like I noticed that a lot of the people that talk all of this, you know, this narrow type of perspective, they're not really organizers. They don't organize anything. They're not organizing any protests. They're not organizing any lobbying efforts to try to change government policy. And people that actually do organize and actually do work understand the importance of coalitions. And I don't think that, you know, that there's something wrong with recognizing the plight of women, you know, the plight of, you know, we have women in our community that are, you know, that suffer, you know, double oppression and discrimination as women and as Black, you know, as being Black people. So it's like, I don't see like why people have a hard time understanding that there are common issues that we face, like working people, period. You know, people in society have to deal with the common ruling elite that controls everything. You know, the 1% that controls the means of production, that controls these corporations, that drive foreign policy, that has this country involved in all kinds of wars that we shouldn't be involved in. All those things. I mean, these are things that organizers like a Martin Luther King understood, the need for broad-based coalitions. And that's the reason why, that's one of the primary reasons why people like that got taken out. Like people like a Fred Hampton gunned down. You know, a person like a Malcolm X or Martin Luther King got killed. You know, the people that are about their life pose more of a threat than these people that just talk this isolationist type of ideology, man. Like a lot of these personalities on here. Like, when was the last time any of these prominent quote unquote pro-black people here on YouTube have organized anything besides speaking engagements?
These YouTubers on here, I take them with a grain of I got it. Yeah, I take these YouTubers with a grain of salt up on here for the most part. Like, just like you said, like a lot of them, they just talking heads. Most of them ain't serious. They ain't got no boots on the ground. They ain't never did anything in the black community whatsoever, and just getting on YouTube because people can listen to them talk, and they just up here just making all types of crazy demands that and holding people to standards that they don't even hold themselves to. So yeah, I will agree with you. Everything you said about a lot of these YouTubers up on here, I would agree with that. Let's see, at the Panthers, yeah, I would agree that the Panthers had a lot of allies and they did form a lot of coalitions. I would argue that was their downfall. A lot of the COINTELPRO agents that ended up coming out ended up being non-black. One of them being the Asian dude that they ended up getting all their guns from. He was an FBI informant. So a lot. Some of their mistakes came from some of the coalitions.
But also, like a lot of the informants were, most of the informants were black people. Like a lot of the people that ratted out
you got something that was black. That's why I didn't say all. Yeah, that's
I mean, a lot of them. I mean, most of the people that infiltrated the Panthers were black. Like that's the easiest way to infiltrate an organization is to have a black person in there. So I don't think that that's the strongest argument against coalitions. I mean, when you look at the person who helped set up Fred Hampton, it was a black man who provided the FBI or the law enforcement with the blueprints to the man's house so that they could shoot and kill him. You know what I'm saying? And then, you know, there are all these other examples of people informing on the Panthers, you know, telling
it wasn't all non-black people. That's why I said, that's why I didn't say all. But yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying like the majority were black. Like the majority of the people that infiltrated the Panthers were black. Like, you know, it wasn't mainly like these coalition members that brought down the Panthers. Of course, they, you know, had agents and spies all over the leftist movement in this country.
Yeah. And as far as the women thing goes, you know, yeah, we do need to support our women. Yes, like, you know, as far as feminism goes, I spread my opinion about them as well. You know, first wave feminism was needed, was necessary. I have no issues with first wave feminism. Anything after that was a detriment to the black community. Second, third, and fourth wave feminism, no go. All that was a detriment. It was very anti-male, very misogynist ideologies that got forced on us, and a lot of us grew up under these ideologies, and that's why a lot of us hold some of the positions that we hold, because we had normalized a lot of this craziness that feminism has pushed on us and everything else. And
what do you mean by like what do you mean by second and third wave feminism, and what is the negative stuff that you're talking about?
Well, in the second wave feminism is when a lot of the anti-male rhetoric started to coming out. That's when the lesbians really kind of took control of the feminist movement, and everything kind of started becoming very anti-male, very anti-patriarchy, very you know, painting this picture that all men are misogynists and this, that, and the third, you know, just painting this narrative because they painted us to be the bad guy, because, you know, the feminist movement needed the bad guy. pretty much, they needed the yang to the yang, and they decided to, paint men as the bad guy. Because, when you always hear them talking about patriarchy, and when they talking about patriarchy, who are they talking about? Are they talking about men? So when they talking about taking down the evil patriarchy, and patriarchy is this, and patriarchy is everything, it got everything to do with what's wrong in my life. Ultimately, you're saying men had everything to do with what was wrong in your life. Ultimately, you're saying men must be taken down. These are cold buzzwords that all kind of got slipped in, and it all started in second wave feminism, like in the late 70s, early 80s, like when the second and third wave started popping off. That's when the whole narrative kind of started spinning into being anti-male. Because first wave feminism wasn't anti-male. It was just about getting women's rights, getting equal. It was about first wave feminism legitimately was about equal rights. Second, third, and fourth wave feminism became about special rights. And that's a lot of this is when the law started.
What do you mean by special rights? I mean, when you talk about special rights,
like the family court, like the laws in the family court.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick, when you talk about like special rights, that reminds me of like what, these white conservatives say that black people are seeking the special rights. So what do you mean by special rights? And like, the whole thing about patriarchy, like I'm not a feminist, like I don't study that stuff like that, but I know that a lot of times, like when they're talking about like patriarchy, they're talking about like male rulership, like the fact that they don't have equality and stuff like that in every sense of the word. Like women still earn a fraction of what men earn and all that kind of, so there are all these.
I support them getting equal pay wage as far if they work in the same job. If they work in the same job, they should get equal pay wage. But if the guy's working a harder job and he's getting paid more, he's just getting paid more because he's working a harder job.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Like, a lot of the things are saying like people in the same profession, like, are paid differently based on their gender.
Now that I have no problems with. That I have no issues with. I have no issues with women getting. I support that if they work in the same job. I absolutely. If you and a female is working the exact same job, she should be getting paid exactly the same way you getting paid. I totally agree with that. That I have no problems with. But that's a first wave feminism ideology, though.
Yeah, it's like I really need to learn more about that stuff because I think that a lot of times we just like people use these buzzwords and stuff like that. And I just think people are just like hostile to any mention of the word feminism. Like their antennas automatically come up. And,
you don't think feminism is a part of white supremacy? Like you don't think feminism falls under white supremacy?
Just the idea of equality, I believe in equality, like regardless of somebody's race or their gender and stuff like that. I think that all people should have equal opportunities and, equal access to, the jobs and other resources and things like that. So I don't have any on a theoretical level in terms of like a lot of the things that some of the things that they're seeking, in terms of equality and stuff like that, equal treatment and equal wages and stuff like that. There's still issues of inequality in this society. There's still barriers that women,
outside of pay wage, can you give me something else that's kind of unfair towards women, like as far as like laws or whatever, like as far as society or whatever, like outside of pay wage?
Well, it's not just like pay wage. It's like, you deal with the, issues of street harassment and stuff like that, misogyny. All we have to do is in terms of just Black women in general, all we have to do is look at our Black community and understand like the differences between men and women. We hear the misogyny in the music. We see the misogyny here on YouTube, the disrespect of women. We see it in terms of the leadership in communities. For instance, like women don't have as much leadership positions, for instance, like in the church, for instance, or even in traditional civil rights organizations. They have a male-dominated leadership, and that's part of the reason why
women not having high church. As far as women not having high church positions, you could blame the Bible for that one. That's not men's. Well, you are actually men.
Well, those are men that are in charge of those institutions.
The Bible. That's a different argument, but yeah.
Yeah, but you get the point. But it's like, that's a whole nother issue. The bottom line is, I think that all people should have equal treatment and equal rights and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'm cool with equal rights. I'm I'm fine with equal rights. I just don't like special rights. That's what I don't like. I don't.
But I'm like, where are the special right?
And I feel like feminism and the LGBT both push for special rights.
What special rights though? Like, what are concrete?
Well, again, I was, the whole family court thing, how lopsided it is, and how hard they fight to keep it that way. I mean, they don't want the family court to change. I mean, they push to get a lot of these lopsided laws that's in their favor in place, and they refusing to bend on them. So these fall under the special rights that I'm talking about.
Yeah, that whole issue like of child support and like just all that stuff. That's a very valid issue. Like I could do a whole. I mean, I probably need to do a whole program just talking about like the issues around that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's a whole nother subject. But yeah, I mean, that is a good point, like about how in many ways you could say that the court system leans in favor of women when it comes to child custody issues, when it comes to child support and all those types of issues. But I think that that's just one piece of the whole thing in terms of like this whole women's rights movement and stuff. And I think that what happens is people focus solely on that and concentrate on that to make it seem like, these general ideas of feminism are wrong and stuff, or, evil and are destroying the black community.
Don't you think as a black man, don't you think, because we can both agree that as a black man, you could agree that black men are kind of like down on marriage now, opposed to like when we was younger and everything else. Like you see a lot less black marriages nowadays. And don't you think that a lot of these court laws got a lot to do with that being the case? Don't you think that's kind of like what's shaking a lot of these dudes up from getting married?
Yeah, I mean, I think that now, like with social media, you have like all these people talking this and that about like the court system and stuff like that. I think that that's discouraging some, but I don't think that that's the main driver behind, the lack of marriage in our communities. Like there are all kinds of factors, like, economic factors. Like if somebody doesn't have the means to provide for a family, they're not going to get married. And then when you look at the criminal justice system in terms of mass incarceration of black men, black men dying young because of inner city violence. When you look at the educational gap between black men and black women, that's another reason why a lot of black men are not marrying or, not in that situation. And then also you look at the change in values. Like we live in a society that promotes pimp culture, that promotes the player lifestyle, promotes promiscuity and stuff like that. So there's no real incentive for a man to for a lot of these young men to get married when they live in a culture that's telling them that to be the man, you gotta have dudes
like women. We got dudes that's older, like in their 30s and 40s, that's really not trying to get married like that. Like 20s, like if you're in your 20s, I understand the whole wanting to rip and run and live that certain lifestyle and everything else.
Yeah, even these older guys. I mean, you know this, like the older guys, like they play, they like to have multiple partners too. I mean, the lack of commitment, like people don't have the same level of commitment that they had back in the day. Like people would get married like right out of high school back in the day. Like today, like because they have so many options and because like women like have been taught to be more promiscuous. So a man doesn't have to wait to get married to have sex and stuff like that. And then, it's easy access for a lot of men, so they don't have any real incentive to commit. And then also you have a culture that's constantly telling them that you're the man if you got all these women. Like they measure their manhood by how many bodies they.
I don't know though, but guys have always been like chasing women around, right? Like
yeah, but
even back in the day, guys would be chasing women.
Yeah, that's true. But like
but they were still getting married though. They would just be cheating on their wives. You know what I mean? But they were still running around here like it did not. I mean, they were just cheating on their wives. So so it wasn't the commitment part. I don't think it's the commitment part that's scaring them, because they would, if they want to rip and run, they're going to rip and run whether they married or not. Like that's just kind of what it is. If that's in your blood, that's just what you're going to do. A ring ain't going to stop you. Yeah,
but it's like I just think that people had like they valued marriage. They saw marriage as like something that they were supposed to do and stuff. It was like part of the culture, but now it's like that's not the case right now. I mean, we see a decline in marriage in society in general. So, you know, I don't think it's about like people, like most people, making some calculated decision because of the how the courts rule and this and that. Like you do have like those MGTOW and these other groups of men or whatever,
Yeah.
but I don't think that they represent the majority. Like the majority of men are not thinking like, oh, because of this court system, I'm not going to get married and stuff like that. I don't think that that's the thought process.
They'll do everything besides get married. I mean, they'll move in or let the girl move in with them. They'll live with them for X amount of years, have kids with them. They'll get bills in each other's names. They'll do everything besides put the ring on it. What is stopping them? Like these guys, these are the guys I'm talking about, the ones who got like the girls they have for like 6-7 years, and you know they sharing car payments and all this other stuff. You know, they got maybe 2 kids together and everything else. They doing everything besides getting married, but he didn't put that ring on it. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the values thing, but that's a good question. It's like, why would somebody be in that where they're practically married, but they don't want to make that final decision and stuff like that? And even in that situation, you know, that doesn't protect them from being accountable for child support if things don't work out. So even in that situation, you're still going to have to pay that child support if the woman decides to do that. So I don't really see the court system as being the primary reason why these brothers are not getting married. It just goes to the values. Like back in the day, it was like there was taboo around people living together. But today, that's like the norm. Like you see that a lot, people living together for long periods of time. And if a woman is willing to let a man just live with them without getting married and stuff like that, then that's what the man's going to do. I mean, that's what a lot of men are going to do. If a woman is going to let a man be in a relationship with her for an extended period of time and where he has all the benefits of a relationship without the burdens of it, then that's what is going to happen. The man's going to be in that situation, you know. But yeah, I wanted to ask you about there's a couple of other issues going on. Did you hear about that situation where the woman well, actually, she's not a woman. She was like 16 years old and she was sentenced to life in prison. And her name is Cyntoia Brown. Did you hear about that?
No.
It's been on social media where she's like 16 years old. She was forced to be like a sex slave. And there was a situation where she killed somebody that was posing a threat to her. And she was sentenced to life originally. And now they say that she has to serve 51 years, even though she says that she was acting in self-defense.
How about say, was it self-defense?
Yeah, she's saying that she thought it was like she was defending herself. She feared for her safety. It was a situation where like this John or whatever had guns in the area and stuff like that. And she thought that he was going to take her life or whatever. And she decided to take his life. And now they're saying that she has to serve 51 years. And the fact of the matter is she was like 16 when she was sentenced to life. And there's like some case law that basically says that juveniles can't be sentenced to life. And yeah, it's an outrageous situation. So that was the next thing I was going to do.
Where did this happen out of curiosity?
What was that?
Where did this happen at?
Yeah, let me pull up the story and share it with people real quick.
It happened in the United States, like in this country?
Yeah, it's here. Yeah, it's in the United States.
This is a black girl?
I'm not sure in her identity. She looks like she could be biracial or something. Let me pull up I'm gonna pull it up so people can see it.
Peace to Renee. I see Renee's in the chat.
Yeah, shout out to Renee. Yeah, so here's the story. A child sex slave who killed a man who bought her must serve 51 years in prison. Yeah, and this happened in Nashville. She was 16 years old and a victim of child sex trafficking.
This happened in
2004. She was accused of killing a 43-year-old Nashville real estate agent who solicited sex from her. And the Tennessee Supreme Court ruled that she had to serve 51 years in prison before her release. And yeah, she was convicted of first-degree murder, and then sentenced to life imprisonment. And they say that she can't be eligible for parole until like 5 decades. And they say that the person that she killed, he had a name of Cutthroat. His nickname was Cutthroat. And she feared that he would kill her. He allegedly drove her to his house in his pickup. She saw a gun in his cabinet and all that kind of stuff. She feared for her safety, and she ended up shooting this guy. And now she has to serve like 50-something years in jail. And, you know, there's a documentary on her life and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of people have been talking about this. So you're not familiar with this. Let me see.
This is the first I'm hearing about it.
It's been all over social media. A lot of people have been talking about it, a lot of celebrities and stuff.
Yeah, that's crazy. This happened in 2004, and they just now sentencing her. So she already got 14 years served.
Yeah, it's crazy. And a lot of celebrities have been speaking out on her behalf, like, you know, Rihanna and some other people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was one thing I wanted to touch on. Let me check the chat room real quick.
Get an appeal? Or was that the appeal?
Yeah, that, from what I understand, that's the Supreme Court in Tennessee. I'm sure that they're going to go to, well, actually, from what I understand, they're taking it up to a higher court. Let's see. Yeah, I know I read somewhere that they were taking it to a higher court.
Yeah. Well, say that sounds like it's qualified.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. So did you hear about the Black Panther movie as well? Like getting nominated for the Golden Globes, being one of the first hero movies to get nominated.
I didn't hear about that. That's good though, but I didn't hear about it.
Yeah, because that's like, you know, I mean, that movie was deep on so many levels. It, you know, not only was it a commercial success, but it raised a lot of issues. As you know, everybody was talking about, you know, different things in that story, in that movie, like debating the whole thing of T'Challa versus Killmonger and all that kind of stuff, and you know, the issue of women and stuff.
A lot of
that's a great thing.
Issues between American blacks and Africans. And
right, exactly, like the whole Pan-Africanism piece. You know, so it was like a great, and then it was just a great film overall, like the great action and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a positive development, man.
Yeah, that's really good that they got nominated for it. I mean, you know, people going to try to downplay it, saying it's all Disney and everything else, but yeah, whatever. You know, like I thought the movie was positive on the way it was written. I enjoyed the way it was written and everything else. You know, me being a superhero fan, you know, I was going to be into it regardless. But just the fact that how they wrote it, I appreciated it even more because, again, like you said, it brought up a lot of deep issues and good. It was a good talking piece. I mean, that movie had people talking for like a month.
Yeah, because like I know I created multiple videos about it, and I know a lot of other people did. Some people were like, a lot of these people online were like critical of it before it even came out based on the trailer, saying all this nonsense about it. And I was like, come on, man, you got to give a movie a chance. And when it came out, like it was phenomenal, man. It raised so many different questions and stuff. And like, as I was talking to my lady the other day, like we were talking about, like, one of the great things about the writing is the fact that they actually made you identify with the villain. Like you really felt for the villain. And, you know, and a lot of people really liked the villain more than they liked T'Challa, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like they've had you like rooting for the villain against the hero and stuff like that.
That had everything to do with the writing too. That had everything to do with the writing.
Yeah, it was great, man. That was like one of the best superhero films ever, man.
Oh yeah, they dropped a couple of trailers this too.
Yeah, I saw those trailers for the a new Avengers movie, man. Like, you know, that looks like it's gonna be incredible, man.
When they dropped the new one for Captain Marvel movie.
Oh yeah, that what's the it's Marvel something.
Yeah, Miss Marvel. Well, that was an old name in the comics, Miss Marvel. Yeah, they changed it to Captain Marvel.
Oh, Captain Marvel, yeah, okay.
Yeah. That comes out in March, and that's the movie right before the Avengers movie. That one comes out in March.
And yeah, so that's probably going to explain why the guy Nick Fury had that device. You know, like at the end, he has that device.
Right.
It's probably going to explain what that's all about, man.
Right. So, yeah. It's for what I saw in the trailer, it's going to be a backdrop. It's going to be a backdrop, and it's going to lead up to that point. Like the end of the movie is probably going to be right there where the Avengers ended at, and everything else. So it's
really? Okay.
Yeah, it's going to tell a backdrop to her origin and who she is, and why he hit her up at the end of the movie and everything else. So it's going to explain all that. It's going to take Nick Fury back when he was younger and everything, and Phil Coulson and all of them. They all going to be younger and everything in that movie. So yeah,
I got to see that, man. It's like yeah, Marvel's definitely stepping their game up, man. I mean, I always was a fan of Marvel more so than DC anyway. Like growing up, when I collected comic books back in the day, but yeah, they're stepping it up, man. With this.
When I was younger, DC was kind of cookie cutter, and Marvel was where it was at. You know, DC got deeper years later, but I was already like a Marvel head. Like I was just so engulfed in Marvel. It was, so yeah. DC used to kind of like DC had good heroes as far as like powers go. Like their powers was off the chain. They could do all types of crazy stuff and everything, but they actual stories and origins and all that, it was kind of cookie cutter, kind of boring, and it wasn't a lot of substance to their characters. Not like in Marvel.
It's like, and Superman, like, you know, he's so unbelievable. Like his powers are just too much. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I mean, I just don't see them in the same category. Like DC, like I rock with a couple of DC heroes, but like for the most part, I was all Marvel and stuff. And yeah, man, it looks like that new Avengers movie is gonna be awesome too, man. Like man, I was like, one of my concerns was I was thinking like in that the last one, I was concerned that they were gonna destroy Wakanda and stuff. Because like they showed one of the fight sequences like near Wakanda, the place, you know. So I was concerned about that, but I can't wait to check that out.
Yeah, everybody can't wait for the next Avengers movie because everybody wants to see what happens.
Yeah, because he, you know, I know by now everybody should have saw it by now, like anybody that was interested. So it's just like crazy when he wipes out all those characters, like all those characters just disappear. And it's like I'm wondering like how they gonna fix that, man, you know?
Yeah, and that was just like the end of the movie. Like, oh, like wow, like it just goes off like that. Like I remember I was in shock. Like, okay,
that was crazy, man. I gotta see that again, man. That's crazy. I wonder, like, I'm really looking forward to that next one, man. It's, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a couple of other stories I wanted to talk about real quick. Did you hear about this white supremacist at Columbia harassing black students?
No. What happened with this?
Yeah, let me just show people this real quick. It's crazy, man. I'm gonna share my screen real quick. So you had this story out of Columbia, you know, Columbia in New York City, you know, where this white student was harassing a group of black students. And he was basically telling them that white people are the best thing that happened to the world. We built modern civilization. He was yelling at the students, basically telling them that white people did everything. And you see this photograph right here. And they're asking for like Columbia to take action against this white student or whatever. Let's see what else he's saying. Yeah, so basically it's the typical white supremacist talking point where they basically say that black people had no history and, you know, white people are responsible for every invention and modern civilization and all that kind of stuff. And you know, that typical stuff, man.
Like typical white nationalist jargon that I deal with whenever I talk to these people. Yeah.
So how do you respond to that? Like, how? Because a lot of the people say, well, the white man created the nuclear bomb. The white man created the telephone, the computer, the airplane, and you know, the ships that fly to the moon and all that kind of stuff, satellites, you know, you know, all these different inventions and stuff. And they'll say, like, all these developments in modern technology, the white man is responsible for that. And, you know, and then they put us in this image of
a lot of that stuff doesn't even. A lot of that stuff you named doesn't even get invented without the use of gunpowder, right? And white man didn't create gunpowder. The Asians created gunpowder. White man stole it from them. And, you know, like the white man stole, they the biggest thieves of all time. Half the stuff they got, they stole. So, I mean, you know, like even their inventions, they stolen copyrights and trademarks from people all over. They like, again, you see how they trying to take credit for this, that, and the third, but they fail to leave out, like they take credit for the gun, but they leave out the fact that they got the gunpowder from. And it's like they you know, they try to manipulate and whitewash everything in history. You know, is amazing. You know, especially if you got this European indoctrination of history that we got in these public schools, and you didn't actually learn. And that's the only history you learned, was the history you learned in school. You will believe a lot of this crap, because that's pretty much how they were spinning it, until you actually look deep into history and find out they didn't invent as much as you probably thought they did.
Right.
They actually did a lot of stealing. That's what they did.
Yeah, because I mean, even like in a lot of these inventions that they're talking about, like there were black people involved in helping to create a lot of those things. And then like the foundation for human civilization comes out of Africa, like, you know, the creation of mathematics, medicine, architecture, philosophy, religion, all these different things had their origin in Africa. You know, Africa is the cradle of human civilization and stuff. And, you know, these people just are ignorant of the facts. Like a lot of these white supremacists, they're very ignorant. And then we are ignorant. And because of that, we carry on the myth of white supremacy. You know, we carry on this myth of black inferiority because we don't know our history and stuff. We don't know about our great legacy as a people. And it's like, you know, it's just crazy that you would have somebody with this kind of mentality at some quote unquote Ivy League school where you're supposed to be getting the best education in the country and stuff. And like, you know, I just wonder how I would have dealt with that situation if I had some white student in my face back in my college days. Like, we probably would have just rushed that person and, you know, dealt with them and stuff, man. It's crazy, man. Mm-hmm. How would you deal with that situation if you were confronted by somebody like that?
Well, I would correct them. I'll correct them. Actually, I'll correct them. See, depends on what type of situation we're in. 9 times out of 10, I would just probably correct them or whatever. You said this happened in Colombia? This happened in New York?
Colombia and New York City. Man.
Yeah, New York City. Yeah, he probably was right. That whole area over there by Colombia has been kind of gentrified and everything. So it's like, that's probably why he felt so comfortable screaming that and everything else. But I definitely would have had to at least correct him, if nothing else. But he seemed like was pretty drunk according to the pictures I saw. He seemed like he might be lubricated. But he was speaking his thoughts. You know how they say, you know, drunken mind speaking sober tongue. So he definitely is probably one of these little trolls that be running around here on the internet spewing this garbage at black people all day long.
Yeah, definitely. That's crazy. Yeah, so let me check out what people are saying in the chat room. Let's see. And then there's one other story I want to touch on real quick. So Def Rocker talked about marriage. He said some people don't know the concept of marriage. They think it's fun and games. Yeah, that's true. Like a lot of people, they don't know like what the burdens are, like what the challenges are and stuff like that when it comes to marriage. And I could just do a whole video just talking about marriage and stuff like that.
Divorce rates is sky high, man.
Yeah.
Divorce
So
rate.
have you ever been married?
Yeah.
Oh, you were? Okay.
The divorce rates are sky high, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So yeah.
Yeah, I know. I just believe me, I know about that.
So you know, all this stuff, you know, is the deterrent for people to get married. You know, so yeah.
Yeah, so let's see. Yeah, and Def Rocker says super conscious people were too critical about Black Panther. Like, you know, they were really criticizing it. Yeah, and that's what I was touching on earlier about the trailer, how people were going off on the trailer. You know, like a lot of people, I just think a lot of us are like ashamed of African culture and stuff. And I think that that's part of the reason why people were going off on the trailer and stuff. Like it was a trailer that was less than 2 minutes long and people were like all upset because somebody had a lip plate.
Like they saw the whole movie.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, and I just think that part of it is just people are ashamed of Africa. You know, they would rather be anything but African. You know, they'll rather be, you know, claim that they're Moorish. They'll claim that they're some alien. They'll claim that they're, you know, some Native American and all this other foolishness. They would literally rather be anything but African because of the programming and social engineering that a lot of our people have gone through. And that's part of the reason why they like instinctively reacted towards the movie before they even saw it. They only saw like a 2-minute trailer, which is crazy, man. You know, and the fact of the matter is, like a lot of the costumes that they used in that film were modeled after actual African ethnic groups. So it wasn't like some white man's imagination. And then you also had like so many Black people involved in the film, a Black director, you know, Black actors, Black costume designers and all that kind of stuff. You know, Black people from all over the diaspora, Black people from Africa, Black people from Europe, Black people from America. But yet you had all these people, these super conscious people, as Def Rocker refers to them, criticizing that film.
Yeah, you know, they tried to find everything possible to tear that film apart before it came out. You know, we had to hear all about how Disney was racist and all this other stuff, everything else that third, but they'll still watch ESPN and they'll still watch ABC. They'll still watch. You know how much stuff Disney has they hands in. They got their hands in a lot of different pots. A lot of people don't even understand how much Disney owns. They're a conglomerate. Like, so, you know, if you're gonna go on and protest Disney, you're gonna be protesting a lot of things. You might be protesting your cable company. Like, people don't even realize how much stuff Disney actually owns. But yeah, so you know, so people to pull the whole, well, Disney made it, so therefore we shouldn't support it is bull crap. Like, that don't even make no sense. If again, you're gonna be, I mean, if you're gonna hold that position, then fine, hold that position, but you might as well get ready to start getting off the grid if you're gonna start holding that position, because everything that you do is owned by, is gonna be some kind of way gonna be going back to white pockets, no matter what it is you do in this country, unless you're living off the grid. So you might as well go ahead off the grid. You being on the internet, leaving that comment, you supporting white supremacy.
Right. Yeah.
So like when we start talking that type of stuff, we gotta be a little realistic. Sometimes that stuff gets a little foolish when you really look at it and you really peel back the onion. So that's why I don't get too caught up in all that. You know, again, it was like, all right, take it for what it's worth. Yeah, Disney's gonna make an assload of money off of this. That's fine, whatever. You know, what kind of message is getting pushed out here? Is it a message that's a negative message, or is it something that we can actually appreciate? And it ended up being something we could appreciate, because again, even the original detractors had to come back later and speak on the movie, as you know, like not in a negative light, but as far as like just trying to dissect the movie, talk about it, and like it even had them talking after the movie was over. They couldn't even come back and hate us so much. So yeah,
right. Yeah. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about before I close out. The other thing is, let's see. Yeah, there's this story out of Baltimore where I live, about this young man who was trying to speak out against inner city violence and trying to, you know, do something positive, and he ended up being killed. You know, So I just wanted to briefly talk about that and like what we can do about this violence that plagues Black communities. Like, so this is an article from the Griot, and it talks about this teenager who gave an anti-violence presentation before the Baltimore City Council being shot. He was shot fatally recently. He was involved in this community group called Community Law and Action. His name was Devontae Friedman. Yeah, and he participated in a 6-week-long training intensive program for high school students. And he went to this city council to talk to them about preventing inner city violence. And you also had a situation like this in Chicago where this young girl wrote this essay about inner city violence and about the need to address the problem. And she ended up getting killed by a stray bullet. So it's like, these stories are just like so heartbreaking, man, that you still have this violence that plagues our communities, man. This past weekend, I was in this area where we were actually, I went to this meeting and we were talking about trying to develop like an art district in this downtrodden area of Baltimore that used to at one point be like a thriving sector where they had like all this entertainment and art and all that kind of stuff. But now it's like an open drug market, like an open air drug market. And, not too long ago, like a few weeks ago, this little girl was shot in a crossfire. Like she's only like 5 years old or something like that, shot and severely injured. And before that, like in July, her sister, who's like 7 years old or something like that, was shot and killed in the back of a car. And it's like, this issue of violence just has to be addressed, man. And it's like, I wonder like what can actually be done to address this problem. Like, what do you think we need to do to address this problem of inner city violence, man?
Well, first things first, like I've always stated, the family unit is first and foremost number one. A lot of this violence is coming from kids in broken homes, right? So we need to fix this family unit. We need to get this together. That's why I was talking about the whole laws and everything else getting put in place, because I honestly do believe that would help raise the marriage rate, and we can have less single mothers running around and more married women with actual children, opposed to just the baby mother thing. And then you can have two family households that can help guide these kids, because a lot of these kids are lost. They're looking for guidance. If you don't have a male figure around and you're just being raised by a single mother, you're going to go out looking for a male figure to guide you or to show, pretty much teach you how to be a man, right? And that's when you start looking out. And most of the time, these be like the street dudes. Most of the time, these be like the hustlers on the block. These end up being the men that some of these boys are looking up to, because these are the men that are getting respect in the neighborhood. These are the men that got all the money. These are the men that are doing things, making moves, everything else. They don't have their fathers around. So it's like, so they start, again, a lot of our boys are looking for father figures, and they find them in the wrong places, and that ends up attracting them to the wrong lifestyle. So again, family unit is key to fixing this. Believe it or not, is that will help better situations in the home. Get the kids focused. They can have a male figure to look up to, opposed to looking at the negative, and it'll minimize a lot of it, in my personal opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I think the family does play a role. Like, I had these discussions with Obsidian, and, I acknowledge that family plays a role, but you also have to deal with the poverty. You also have to deal with the economic resources.
Yeah, family will help that.
Yeah, unemployment. You got to deal with, failing schools, like how there's a disparity in terms of the quality of education that children receive in inner cities compared to affluent suburbs and stuff. So it's like a wide range of issues that have to be addressed. Like if people had a legitimate way to earn a living, then they wouldn't be caught up in the drug trade. And that's where a lot of the violence comes from. Like a lot of people are caught up in the violence because they use violence to protect markets, to protect certain drug territory or whatever. And then you have the whole gangster culture and all that kind of stuff. That's something that needs to be addressed. You also have music that popularizes, the thug lifestyle, gangster lifestyle, selling drugs and using drugs. So it's like a multifaceted problem that needs to be addressed from different angles. And I don't think like that, I think that the issue of family is important without a doubt, but I don't think that the issue is like placed solely on the back of the single.
No, not solely. No, I'm not blaming the single mothers. I'm just saying, I'm just talking about the reality of the situation. A lot of these kids that are in these situations don't have positive male figures in their lives. And I'm not blaming the mothers for it per se. It could be the father's fault, it could be the mother's fault. Who knows? I don't know. That's that's a case by case basis. I'm just but at the end of the day, this is the reality. A lot of these people, are raised in single family households. They're looking for a family outside of a family. A lot of times they join these gangs because they're in search of a family. They want to be a part of something. They had that emptiness in them because they didn't feel like they had a real family. They probably got a single mother who probably has to work all the time just to pay the bills, whatever, or whatever the case may be. Hardly ever home. Probably what they call them latchkey kids or whatever the case may be. Probably spend a lot of time, and they running out in the street. While the mother's out trying to pay the bills and everything. And again, they looking for a family. They need that family attachment. So this is what attracts a lot of them to this gang lifestyle. Like I said, the family unit isn't the end all do all, but it will definitely decrease a lot of these things, I feel.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So before I go to this last story, I just want to let people know that if you want to join this discussion, you can post your email address in the chat room, and you can I'll send you the link so that you can join this to add to our conversation, or if there are subjects that you think we should talk about, feel free to let me know and I'll add you to the discussion. And Renee was here earlier, so if you're interested, just let me know and I'll send you a link as well so you can join the discussion, or anybody else that I'm familiar with. You all can just post your email address in the chat and we could add you to the discussion.
I'll send the link.
So what were some of the things that you talked about on your hangout this past Saturday, Psycho? What, other than the Kevin Hart piece, but there are some other issues that y'all touched on?
Let's see. I talked about I know I got in on the gay agenda and the Kevin Hart stuff, and I forgot what else I was talking. They was talking about the chat had me talking about some case where the skinny black dude got crushed by this big 300-pound Becky. It was an old case.
It was real life, a real case.
Yeah, it was a real case. It happened. It happened like almost a year ago. Almost. It happened like earlier this year. I remember we talked about this when it first happened, but somehow or another the case had came out or whatever. The case was done, and I forgot they had gave a time for it or whatever. But yeah, it's a weird case. And it was something else they had me talking about. The chat kind of just had me talking about all kinds of stuff. Oh, that's what they had me talking about. Matter of fact, you probably know about this. They had me look up this this gay gang in Baltimore. That's a gang of gay people in Baltimore who are violent, who are out here. I heard they was raping people and all types of other stuff.
Really? Wow, yeah. I didn't hear nothing about that.
Look it up. It's called Cut It or something like that. They out in Baltimore.
Oh, wow, I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, some gang called Cut It or something. They out there doing all types of I don't know. It was the first time I heard about it. I think Nikki had heard about it already, and she was talking about it in the chat. But yeah, That was weird. That was a weird story right there.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything. I'm surprised I haven't heard anything about that on the news.
Yeah, it's supposed to be a notorious gang out there or something. They've been around for a minute, I think. They said like 10 years almost or something.
Wow, for real? I gotta
Yeah, they're
look
not
that up.
new. Yeah.
I gotta look that up. I haven't heard anything about that. Yeah, so the last thing I wanted to touch on real quick is like the celebrity news real quick. I don't know if you heard about this situation involving Michelle Williams and her fiance Chad Johnson. Are you familiar with that? Like, she's that's the lady from
Destiny's Child.
Yeah, Destiny's Child.
Uh-huh.
And she was with this white guy, whatever. They were engaged. They had this program on the OWN network, and now they're getting a divorce. And some issues around race came up in their relationship. Like she said something about like how he doesn't know about the black experience or whatever, and so that actually became an issue in their relationship. And they broke up, and a lot of people are talking about this because this is like like the whole swirl thing. They present that as like some kind of answer to the black woman's relationship issues. All she has to do is get some white knight in shining armor to rescue her. And I'm really interested. I wonder how these swirlers are covering this issue. How they're talking about this situation, man. Because a lot of times, they present just a rosy picture of these interracial relationships. And I'm sure that they were probably talking this up, saying that this was great. This is awesome that they had this program. And now here we are in this situation where this black woman gets divorced. And from what I remember, this guy, Chad Johnson, who was her fiance, basically was making a mockery of her mental issues. Like she suffered from depression. She had some other issues, and this guy was making a mockery of that. So you didn't hear much about this,
Well, I heard about the breakup,
Yeah.
and I heard he was a racist. I heard that. I didn't look too deep into this, but I knew they had the show. And I did hear that they was breaking up. This is the first time I'm hearing that race was actually an issue as far as like her complaining about him not understanding the black experience. But like, what did she think was going to happen? I mean,
Yeah.
this is what I don't understand about these swirlers. Like, you go into this, like, I don't think a lot of people understand what it is they sign up for. And a lot of these swirlers, I think, me personally, I think a lot of them don't know what they signed up for, and they start to find out later on, probably after a kid or so, that this is a little awkward. Like this is more than like it's just like that whole uncomfortable feeling that they have to feel being laying up with these people, and especially when certain things pop off. Like when the racial climate really heats up and everything else, like they are forced to either coon or see their spouse for who the hell they really are. They're forced to do one or the other. Like they at that point in time they're at odds, and I don't know, especially with the kids. I don't know why they will do that to the kids. I think it's just very selfish for swirlers to have kids or whatever, because they're not thinking about the child. They're only thinking about themselves, and they're not thinking about what the child is going to go through. Because I hear these biracial kids stories. I talk to these biracials and I hear these stories, and they sound like horror stories. Like they so confused and lost, and having to they got to switch codes up according to what family members they're around. They got to get on code according to whatever family member they're around. Like they around the black family, they got to try to flip it on to being black. And when they're around the white family, you got to flip it. They got to flip the black part off and try to present themselves as somebody who's got just so happen to have black in them. But don't forget the white side. Like it's like they got a code switch constantly. Like, and it's just like that's insane. It's I don't know. It's just I just think it's selfish for people to procreate with other nations. Me personally, I don't think you're thinking about the kids.
Yeah, I mean, it raises a lot of issues, like for biracial children, like, and I've been thinking about like actually having like I have relatives that are biracial. I'm thinking about like trying to see if one of them would come on here and just talk about their experience. Like it is a challenging situation, when you have these different like identities, like different cultural identities, and you're dealing with the conflict between them. And I don't think that that's something that people take into consideration when they decide to get into these relationships. And, the issue of race, when it comes up, like how they deal with it, like in terms of the man and the woman, like how they address it, like often they try to gloss over it, or, they try to avoid it. And you have situations where these black women are in relationships with white men that are actually racist, or, black men with white women that are actually racist. They think that simply because they're laying down with somebody or because somebody is having sex with them, that that's supposed to absolve them of their racism, when, there are plenty of examples of white racists that are with black people, that have sex with black people. So I want to show this story, like the segments that deal with this racial issue that came up in their relationship real quick before we close out. Yeah, and I want to thank you for tuning, joining this hangout.
No doubt.
Yeah, let me try to share my screen real quick. Yeah, so in this article from the Griot, they said that the couple admits that they lash out at each other during a disagreement, where Williams brought up how different their races have an impact on how they communicate. And she said something about how he doesn't understand something because he's not black. And he took offense to that. And, basically she said he didn't understand a particular issue because he's not black. And you wouldn't understand why I communicate the way I do because you're not black. And then she also talked about how he probably didn't grow up around a lot of black people. And then he was very offended by that. And then I think that's, if I recall correctly, that's when he brought up the issue of, her mental problems in the past, where he basically asked her if she took her meds today when they started having this exchange. And we all, like a lot of people know that she struggled with, depression and other mental health issues. And he basically made a mockery of that by asking her if she took her meds. And then like shortly after this whole situation, they ended up getting they didn't get a divorce since they weren't married yet, but they decided to call it quits. And it's just like, that's the thing. Like a lot of times these people they will seem like they like people think that, well, this person understands me and this and that. But the fact of the matter is, there's still that racial divide. Like the fact of the matter is, like, it's going to be difficult for any white person to fully understand the black experience. Like even if they're quote unquote liberal or whatever, they're not going to fully grasp your experience as a black person. So it's like, it's like, why wouldn't somebody rather be in a relationship with somebody that fully understands your experience instead of, being in a relationship with an outsider that doesn't fully get it, that doesn't fully understand what you go through as a black person. Yeah, so it's just another one of these situations, man. And it's just another example how swirling is not necessarily the answer to the black woman's relationship issues.
Same vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. For the black man, because you have a lot of black men, for instance, who have channels where they're talking about how the white woman is all this and that, and how the white woman is.
I found a couple of those channels. I didn't think it was too many of those. I actually found a few of these channels. These dudes are crazy. But yeah,
but I will say that it seems like, even though you have a lot of black male misogyny on here, it's like not as many black male channels that are dedicated to like, placing the white woman on a pedestal compared to these black women channels. At least my survey of things.
People had to actually point me in the right direction with these dudes, and these dudes don't get nearly as many views as these women who promote Swirling does either. The ones that they did point me to, but I found about 2 or 3 that focuses on that. You know,
Because
as far as
there's
channels, yeah.
yeah, because there's so many of these black women channels where like nowadays they're just like promoting this, like, you know, not, it's not even a situation where they're saying, well, just find who you're happy with. They are literally promoting white men, you know, over black men, you
Yeah,
know.
that's the whole theme of the channel.
Yeah, where they're, you know, like they cite all these negative statistics to make the black man look like he's basically the devil, like he's an animal, he's a brute, he's an ape, and they literally call black men that stuff, man. It's just, it's sick, man.
What's your opinion about this whole gender first thing?
Yeah, I think that's ridiculous, man. It should be about the race first over everything. Like, because you got these black men that say that black men that say, well, black men should be about promoting black male interests over everything. And then on the other hand, you got these black women saying that black women should be all about black women's empowerment over everything. And that kind of goes into your point about like some of the extremist type of feminist mentality that
Right.
some people have. So, and I just think that at the end of the day, nobody wins when you have this gender war. You basically are destroying your community when black men and black women are at war with each other. That's the end of the black community, man. Anytime you're looking towards the oppressor, basically to be your salvation, you're in bad shape. I mean, you got these women and men looking towards the white man and white woman to be their savior in their relationship problems, when if the fact of the matter is a lot of these problems that we have as a people go directly back to, you know, the legacy of slavery, the legacy of Jim Crow, you know, the legacy of the minstrel shows that taught us to hate ourselves, you know, all the negative depictions of Africa. Like we wouldn't have these self-hatred issues, you know, a lot of these relationship issues if it wasn't for, you know, the legacy of slavery and Jim Crow and stuff like that. They literally taught us to worship white people, man. They literally taught us that white women were the standard of beauty. And it's like you can't address these issues in our community without dealing with that. And it's just a shame that these people are looking to the same white man that helped create these problems as like some kind of salvation. You know, they talk about colorism and this and that. And, you know, a lot of these women think that a white man appreciates their hair and, you know, their skin more than a black man, when it was the damn white man that taught you to hate being black, when it was the white man that taught you to hate your natural hair, you know, and all that kind of stuff, man. So it's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane.
I agree. This whole narrative of viewing the opposite sex as the enemy is a problem. Is a problem. And it's just discouraging and disturbing to see us splitting off into groups and cutting off the other side and everything else and talking this whole gender first stuff. I'm pro black male first, or I'm pro black woman first. What, that don't even make any sense to me. That's just as asinine thinking. Like if your mother thought like that, you wouldn't be here.
Right.
Your father thought like that, you wouldn't be here. So none of this even makes any sense. Like these are people that are literally going out their way to try to do their part to eradicate the black race, and they just don't care because they only thinking about themselves. People who are gender first are selfish individuals. That's just a position I hold. They're selfish, just like a coon. The coons are selfish. They only think it's all about individualism. They try to put up this front like it's about the black woman or the black male collective when it's absolutely not. It's about individualism. They trying to mask it as some type of fake group thought when that's actually not the case. It's actually a joke, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so there are a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. Like you had like a confrontation with Cynthia G. Like if you could like give us like the details of that, because I didn't get a chance to check out the hangout. I think it was taken down or something like that.
Yeah.
So what were some of the themes that came up in that? And then also I want to ask you about your interview with Nate Gone 11. Like I know that you talked to him. I saw like most of your interview, but if you could like talk about like, you know, the whole I think he's a part of Big Town, whatever. You know, he's down with the manosphere, even though he checks out me every now and then. But I'm really interested in hearing about those two discussions, man. Like, what happened with Cynthia G? Like, since we were talking about these people that are about, like, gender first and stuff, because she never misses an opportunity to bash black men, man. She
Right.
never does. And I know that must have been an interesting discussion.
Yeah, well, it was actually funny. Like I said, I actually blamed you for the whole thing. It was kind of your fault indirectly because yeah, it was that Tuesday. I remember it was that Tuesday that you had made a video earlier that day calling out the people who was against voting and everything else, and then later on you had went live with Obsidian and everything, and I don't know if you remember, but it was a section in that stream where Obsidian was responding to something I was saying in the chat.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
Yeah, it was because
you were asking him about his marital status or whatever, like something about like how he's talking all this marriage stuff, if I'm not mistaken, and he's not married or something.
No, actually,
with
what
the
it
white women thing.
He was trying to call out pro-blacks for not being about being pro-family. Remember, he was trying to say pro-blacks and not pro-family.
Oh, yeah, right.
We don't push about families and everything else. And I was hitting him up in the chat and was like, nah, that's wrong. That's incorrect. It's a bunch of pro-blacks out here that promote black families, that lean on that. What do you think the anti-swirl movement is all about? It's about promoting black families. Like we're not telling people to be anti-swirl but turn gay. Like you say, so the anti-swirl movement is for a reason, like it's all about promoting black families. But and afterwards, but he didn't really he said something, but y'all had moved on or whatever, so it was over with. But not too long after your stream had ended, and then he did his normal show. He started his normal show or whatever.
Oh, okay.
So I had tuned in for the first few minutes, listened to his little opening monologue, see what he had to say or whatever, because I thought he might talk about what y'all was talking about. And sure enough, he started talking about the pro-black family thing again. So I commented in the chat and was like, yo, you gotta really stop saying that. Like, you gotta stop spreading that narrative. You're wrong. Like, you're not paying attention. I don't know what pro-blacks you listening to, but that's just not correct. So he saw my comment, and then he was like, yeah, he started inviting me to come on to discuss it and everything else, this, that, and the third. So I was like, all right, fine, I'll jump in. I really wasn't in the mood to really try to debate this dude, but I was like, all right, whatever, let's do it. So I went up in there, and yeah, that actually was hilarious. Like, so that whole back and forth right there was actually hilarious. But we was going back and forth or whatever the case may be. And long story short, I had got a message after like an hour or so going back and forth with him. I had got a message saying that Cynthia G was over on this other platform calling me out.
Oh, really? Why was she calling you out, man? What was up?
Because of that video I had made. Saying how she was she's real pissed off about that. Cynthia G is
that's a classic, man. That's like, man, I wouldn't be surprised if she was in an interracial relationship. I wouldn't be surprised at all, because like I noticed it, like she's really she really clamps down on her private life. Like, she doesn't talk about it at all. Like, she doesn't talk about who she's dating.
Like she's hiding something.
Yeah, it's like she's hiding something. Like, she's constantly talking about dusty black beta males or whatever. Like, she never says anything complimentary of black men for the most part. Ever. She always talks about how black men did nothing for the liberation of black people. She has no respect for black men, but yet even though she claims to hate the white man so much, she heaps all kind of praise on that white man. She literally worships the white man, despite her anti-white rhetoric.
A dude last week literally asked her, "Can you name me a black man in your life who was a big influence to you?" And she said, "I can't think of anybody." She said, "You know what? Yes, I can. One person, a teacher I had back at elementary school." She had to go all the way back to elementary school to name a teacher she had to name a positive black man in her life.
Yeah, that's a damn shame, man. And that tells me that she doesn't operate from a place of love when it comes to the people, man. She's not about loving black people. The woman has like a lot of hatred towards black men, like just as much hatred as, these swirlers, these people that are open swirlers Like, I wouldn't be surprised if she's a down low swirl or whatever. I wouldn't be surprised at all. Like, I don't have any evidence of this, but I would not be surprised because I noticed how this woman goes out of her way to not discuss her personal life at all. Like, even though she's all in everybody's business, talking about all these racial, like relationship issues, she doesn't talk about her relationship issues at all. And then, like, despite all this anti-Black rhetoric, this woman is always, there's all these pictures of her floating around the internet with these white people. Like, even though she hates them so much, she's always with these white, she's got all these photographs with white people, with white men.
She had this one white girl that she had a picture with that she said that was her best friend.
Yeah, her best friend. It's like, how the hell you go?
Something like that.
It's like, how you go from like having your best friend being a white woman and taking all these pictures with all these white people to being somebody that supposedly hates white people so much.
Trying to start a race.
Albinoid, they're evil albinoids, cockadevils. I don't believe it, man. Like Jay-Z says, I don't believe you. You need more people. To me, she's a joke, man. So I can't take her seriously. But yeah, so she was talking about your video, and in that video that you played, like, you actually had a clip of her basically asking, like, do people take issue with a Black woman being with a white man to the same, something like to the same degree as they would with a Black man being with a white woman or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that was telling that she would even ask that question. It's like, why would you even ask that question? Here you are all blackety black and, so going so hard and so ham against these interracial relationships, but you're going to raise a silly ass question like that. Man, so she wasn't pleased with that, you're saying. And
she wasn't
talking about you.
Yeah, she was calling me out, everything else. I dared him to come through and he wouldn't come up here and blah, 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 and everything and third. So, yeah, so I popped up. And I just started. It was actually, it's actually a lot. I got cursed out in so many different ways. Everything else, it was like me versus like 7 people. They was all on my neck. I had to fight them off.
Man, that's crazy, man. I wish I could have heard that. So, what kind of stuff were they saying? What was they? How were they challenging what you had?
I was all kinds of dusties and betas, all kinds of gay slurs thrown my way and everything else. Yeah, I was all types of stuff, man. You name it, they called me that. But it was funny because she couldn't debunk what I was saying though. Because after everything was all said and done, we actually started having a back and forth, and she was stumbling over stuff and everything else. She had a little cheerleader, her little lawyers, I like to say, actually was back there trying to pick up the case for her. This, that, and third. So I had to get through a couple other people to get back at her. Then she started blocking me, muting me, and this, that, and the third. It was a whole big mess. I had to come in under another account. It was crazy. It was.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
It was a madhouse.
Man, something else, man.
I think it's pretty safe to say she hates my guts.
So she didn't take your video down or anything, did she?
No. I called out on taking my other video down. So earlier this year, I called out for that too. She denied it, of course, but I called out on it because I know she flagged it. But yeah, I don't think she wants to receive any flags. So I think she realizes that's not the way to go. So yeah.
Yeah, and just to let people know, what I'm going to do is look for your video and I'm going to post it in the description box so people can check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what about your discussion with Nick Gong? How did that go? Like, I know I heard part of it, and I know like he's with that with the manosphere and all that stuff.
Yeah, he's deeply entrenched. Yeah, he's deeply entrenched in manosphere. But like me and the Gong always been cool. Like we always speak and everything. We always been cordial and this, that, and the third. And I kind of wanted to get the family an understanding of what MGTOW actually was, because a lot of people kept asking questions. Like, I know a little something, but I don't know. I can't get as deep in the details he can, because that's his thing. You know what I mean? So I wanted to get one of the MGTOW people on who I thought I could hold a respectful conversation with, who wouldn't get too crazy on me. Because you know, some of those dudes, you know, they just, you know, they just start going off half cock. I couldn't bring Obsidian over there. He had the whole chat going crazy. So I had to bring somebody on there who I thought could have a calm conversation and actually get their points across without being too abrasive. So the gong popped in my head. So I asked him.
Yeah, because Obsidian, like he was acting like I was on his show when he was on my channel, man, talking all over me and everything.
Yeah.
But it got, you know, it toned down like to some degree, like, you know, it was halfway civilized. And when I went over to his channel, we had a follow-up discussion as well over there. And you know, he didn't interrupt me on his channel, so that was cool. Like we actually had a chance to talk. The only drawback was that you know, there weren't time limits on how long we would talk. So like he would make a lot of points and I would make a lot of points. And it's like when you have it like that, it's like it's harder to respond to every single point that's being made. But it was a good discussion though, man. But it's like when I engage in those discussions and I see how his people respond, like in the chat room and even afterwards, like afterwards they had like, you know, some of his guests calling in and sharing their views about what they thought about the debate, you know, because I had to leave early. And, you know, it's like these guys, like their comments make it seem as if they are living in some kind of alternate universe in terms of how they see the world, man. It's just interesting to see people with such different perspective, you know.
They very extreme. And it's like, even though I don't disagree with everything they say,
right? Yeah.
I don't agree with everything they say either. I definitely don't agree with their conclusions. You know, like even though like they'll start off with a premise that I agree with, but by the time they get to their conclusion, I'm like, okay, you lost me. You know, like it'll start off with, okay, all right, I agree with that. Okay, I agree with that. Okay, yeah. Wait, what'd you just say? like you know, like
go crazy with it. Yeah, and then like the biggest thing for me is like how in the hell do they support like Donald Trump, man? Like I don't understand how any rational black man can, or black woman, black person, period, can support Donald Trump given his racism, blatant racism. It's like how can anybody in their right mind support him?
Right. You know what's even more confusing, which really boggles my mind, is how somebody like Obsidian, who is a clear integrationist, somebody he's not a separatist,
right,
you know, can support somebody like Jared Taylor. How could
he supports that guy?
Support Jared Taylor.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, you know, Obsidian's done had Jared Taylor on his show a couple of times.
I'm gonna have to look that up. I mean, I think I saw some titles to his videos with that guy's name on it, but I didn't know he agreed.
Yeah, he took that last one, but you know, Obsidian don't keep his streams up. You know, he do them and then he take them down. But yeah, he had Jared Taylor on a couple of times though. One of them I did catch live when it happened or whatever. And yeah, like it just boggles my mind how he supports Jared Taylor, but Jared Taylor's a separatist. This is even like it's like, okay, I'm a little confused because you don't agree with him on separatism. Because if it was up to Jared Taylor, none of y'all over there in that manosphere would be messing with Becky. Becky would be off limits. You would get gunned down for messing with Becky if it was up to Jared Taylor. But yeah, you got Jared Taylor on your platform with all you guys who are cool with Swirling, and this guy, like, he don't want nothing to do with y'all. Like he's a separatist. He wants to get away from y'all. Like me and Jared Taylor got more in common than Obsidian and Jared Taylor. Like, so I'm a little confused why they would have him on. Like y'all don't, like, y'all not trying to separate. You guys are trying to get further into integration. Like y'all want to go deeper into integration. So like I'm a little confused. Like that, y'all views are completely clash.
Yeah, that kind of reminds me of that discussion that that Tommy Sotomayor had with David Duke. Like he was talking like seemed like they were on the same page with the nonsense. And then, you know, Tommy Sotomayor brought up this whole thing about the white women. And he was like, if I knew your views about that, I wouldn't even been on, like David Duke was like, if I knew that you like to be with white women, I wouldn't even been on this program with you.
Facts. That's what I'm saying. Like they just as anti-swirl as me. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I actually got more in common with these dudes, but I wouldn't support them. But they have nothing in common with this guy, outside the fact that he's alt-right, outside the fact that he's on the right side of politics, as far as the right wing, I should say. Yeah, outside of that, they have nothing in common. So it's like, I don't know. I just don't grasp it. I don't get it.
Yeah. And shout out to Renee. I see that you're on the chat. Like, was there anything you wanted to add, Renee, aka Miss Legit?
Peace, y'all. Actually, I had stepped away for a minute, so I wasn't even sure of everything, that y'all have covered. I heard some things earlier, and then I heard what you were just saying just now. But I saw like the topics you had. I think I heard earlier I heard a little bit where you were talking about Kevin Hart or what have you, and what happened with him. And I think that, everybody's saying like, Cat Williams told him this, and he didn't really want to listen to it or whatever the case may be. But the whole thing with Kevin Hart, I think in terms of what happened, I think he definitely made the right decision, which was to, like, I'm not apologizing any further, just to get the job. Although we already know what he's on, I think he made the right decision. But sometimes, see, this is my thing with the whole LGBT thing. They're really not about coexisting, if you will. They want control. They want dominance. And they want to make everyone bow down to that. So if you are in that industry, and especially there's certain particular things you want to do, you have to bow down to the LGBTQ whatever community. You have to do it, because that's who runs Hollywood. That's who runs the studios. That's who make the decisions for all of these type of things like the Oscars. And to me, like, I'm pretty sure they knew some of the things that he said before, but part of it is just like breaking him down. Like, let's see how far he's willing to go to get this job. And so, like I said, in that case, I think he made the right decision. But ultimately, I agree with a lot of people who say that we shouldn't even be participating in these types of functions. I'm in agreement with that, but how realistically it. So yeah, I think he made the right move on that one. And the other thing is people of comparisons between that and being Black. How is this Black man saying this and that? I think people lose track of one very, very, very important thing with the whole LGB thing. That is a sexual choice. That's somebody's sexual proclivity. They are not born that way. There is no proof. There is zero evidence that there is some gay gene. Does not exist. So you're talking about a choice people make to involve themselves in. That is in no way comparable to the Black struggle or what Black people go through. We are Black from the time we're in our mother's stomach to the time we go back into the earth. That's just what it is. There's no choice involved in that. Even people who bleach their skin or whatever they do, your DNA is still that you're a Black person, period. So, for people who are trying to make some correlation there, that's completely ridiculous. And it's a slap in the face to Black people in general to try to make somebody's sexual deviant choice comparable to being Black. And I'm tired of hearing that type of rhetoric and like, oh, well, he should apologize. Apologize for what? If he doesn't want his son to be a homosexual, I support that. Who would want their child to be a homosexual?
Yeah, like the only thing I'll say is this, like in terms of like, whether or not people are making a personal choice or whether or not that's how they were born, I think that as far as I know, like that's still up for debate. Like there's no definitive proof one way or the other. And you have a lot of homosexuals that say, that ever since they had any sense of like sexual, desire or thought, that they had a homosexual orientation and stuff. So that whole issue is debatable, like whether or not they're born with it or not. So that's one thing. The other thing is like what I said before. Like at the end of the day, whether or not you say it's behavior or it's like some innate characteristic with them, the fact of the matter is like it's still a form of discrimination, like to use a slur against a group of people, to, for instance, deny people jobs because of, their orientation, or to deny them certain things or subject them to harassment and abuse. That is a form of discrimination, regardless of what kind of, whether it's like sexual orientation or if it's religion or if it's gender. It's still a form of discrimination. So just on that basic level, there are some similarities in terms of, discrimination based on race and discrimination based on somebody's identity or whatever. There's a basic comparison, even though like we agree without a doubt that there's a fundamental difference, like in terms of our history as a people, like slavery and Jim Crow, and just like how, like, for instance, a homosexual, they can hide their sexual identity and not be immediately identified and discriminated against, the way we are as Black people. So there are differences, and I acknowledge that. But I'm just saying, like, as I said before, like early on, like if this were a white comedian that, used, the N-word like a few years ago, and it was to come up again, and that person was to say, well, what are y'all talking about? I already apologized for that. Get out of my face. I mean, even though he didn't say it like that, but if a white person had that kind of posture, we would be like, hell no. Like, we would make an issue out of that. We wouldn't just lay down and be okay with that stuff. We wouldn't just sit back and say, it's cool for that person to do whatever they were going to do. Like if they were going to host some program, some prominent program, I'm sure that there would be plenty of Black people here on YouTube saying something about it. And, I know that for a fact, like the way people dealt with Paula Deen or whatever that racist white woman's name is, who, said the M-word years ago or whatever, or like even with, Roseanne Barr, the racist statement she made about one of Obama's aides, as I mentioned earlier, like referring to her as a mix between Planet of the Apes and ISIS and stuff. We would speak out against this stuff, man. And
so
I understand, like, it for a fact that Black people on YouTube will be talking about it. And I think that the only reason why this is different, or we have a different attitude, is because it's not a group it's not us, like it's some other group. So we, it's just some other group. Who cares about them being discriminated against?
But see, I'm gonna tell you where I disagree with that point, because I understand what you're saying in terms of discrimination or what have you. But first of all, he's a comedian. You know what I'm saying? He's not running a company or corporation where he's refusing to hire people who are homosexual or what have you. But see, this is the difference to me in terms of, I think it is important to look at whether something is, like you said, an innate trait or if it's a choice. And so, for instance, that means that anybody that he makes fun of who makes a choice to do something, then they have a case against him. For instance, if somebody has a choice in let's say in relationships, and they like to date little people, or let's say they're a chubby chaser or something. That's a choice. That's like a sexual or relationship choice that person is making. So in that terms, that person would have a case against Kevin Hart too. Because ultimately, although that's been lumped in with race, sexuality or what have you, has been lumped in with race, at the end of the day, it is still a choice. And the burden of proof is on proving there's a gauging.
Yeah, but it's like you don't know like definitively whether or not it's a choice. Like, do you really think that somebody would do you think somebody would choose to be like a part of a marginalized group, like a group that, even though like despite all this political correctness, you still have people that call them fags and, don't want to deal with homosexuals at all, disrespect homosexuals, and, wouldn't even want to hire a homosexual or whatever. and people that outright harass homosexuals. I heard about this black man that literally broke this woman's spine because she was a lesbian and stuff. You know, you have hate crimes. Like they created a law against hate crimes involving people based on their, you know, orientation and stuff like that, as a result of the violence that's imposed against these, you know, people that are homosexual. It's like, do you really think that like people, like these people voluntarily choose?
Yes, yes, I do.
Real quick. Yeah, real quick. Like you could say the same thing about the rape culture. The average person is not thinking about going out raping anybody, right? But if the rape culture became normalized, the way the gay culture become normalized. Matter of fact, if the rape culture became cool, the way the gay culture is now considered to be cool, and it was like you could never speak out against the gay culture, or you'll be attacked, you'll be deemed as hateful, or you know, being discriminative towards these people. A whole lot more people will probably be out here raping other people. Like, don't you think? Don't you think, like, if it became normalized, don't you think everybody would be out here raping everybody if it became cool?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people would like really take offense to somebody compare like a sexual orientation to like.
I mean, it's a sexual act.
To a crime and stuff like that. You know, just like people say, like, you know, they'll like draw these moral equivalencies. For instance, saying like, you know, they'll compare like the choice to being a homosexual to some crime like, you know, thievery or something like that, or some other immoral type of behavior. And I can understand like why they would be offended by that, you know, just like on a theoretical level and stuff like that. And the other thing is this, like, you know, I was going to make another point about this whole thing about the homosexuals, and, you know, just about how, yeah, one other point that I want to make is like, a lot of people like talk about these choices that people make in their lives, like, you know, and they stand on their moral high horse and stuff like that about these homosexuals. But when it comes to their own immoral behavior, they don't want to address that. Like, you know, a lot of the things that they criticize these homosexuals for doing, they engage in the same type of activity. They just engage in it with, you know, somebody of the opposite sex. So they're doing like all these things that were quote unquote taboo and stuff like that, but they're doing it with somebody of the opposite sex. And, you know, they have these situations where they're like, for instance, like, you know, they're participating in fornication and stuff like that, but then, and other moral shortcomings like, you know, adultery and stuff like that. But then they want to get on their high horse about these homosexuals and stuff and act like they're some moral person that can look down at these homosexuals and their bad lifestyle choices. It's like, you know, they're guilty of all these other, you know, vices and stuff like that, but yet they want to stand in judgment over these homosexuals. And to me, like that's a display of like hypocrisy and stuff like that. You know, they're engaging in, for instance, like sodomy and all that kind of stuff with somebody of the, you know, opposite sex and stuff like that, but yet they're going to try to get on their high horse about these homosexuals, man. I think that there's like a level of hypocrisy with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah, I mean, I just think it's deeper than a lot of people think. Like, and I understand like these people are talking about deviant behavior and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of people participate in deviant behavior that's heterosexual too, as well. You know.
Can I say something?
Yes.
To something you were saying, you said, do you think people would make a choice to be involved in something, you know, that's marginalized or what have you?
Yeah, I'm like, would they? Like, would you like choose to be like? I mean, it's like intellectually for me, it's like from an intellectual point, like I want to believe that it's a choice, like, and I think that they're making a lifestyle choice. But then again, like I'm just thinking, like, who would voluntarily choose to be in a group that's discriminated against? Like, who would voluntarily choose to be like a homosexual, knowing that most people in society, you know, ostracize homosexuals, even in this politically correct environment?
Well, what I was going to say to that is, yes, I do agree that people would choose to involve in a group that is marginalized or what have you. And it's not to me that they're necessarily making a choice to be in that group, but they're making a choice to participate in that behavior. So it would be the same thing as saying that people nobody would choose to become a crackhead, or nobody would choose to become hooked on drugs. Um, Nobody would necessarily choose to be that, but through choices they make, they did become that. So then I don't hear people complaining about jokes that Kevin Hart's made about people on drugs in the past, crackheads. He had the whole joke about the bum bump, people who are basically homeless and stuff and things of that nature. Because essentially, when people involve, and when people, let's say, do crack or whatever, like I said, they don't say, I want to be a part of this group that's going to be despised in society and be put down, but they decide to involve in that behavior, and that leads to people calling them that. The same thing with homosexuals. It's a sexual pleasure. It's a pleasure to them. It's not even as if you can say that you're doing it because you want to have children. It's a pleasure seeking behavior. And so therefore they are choosing to willfully involve in things that pleasure them. It gives them pleasure. Just like if somebody who does crack, it gives them pleasure. So I think that, yes, people can choose.
Like young people, like people that are like, they're like kids, and they like, as kids, they said that they like had this like orientation, or they identified a certain kind of way, or had certain desires and stuff like that very young. So it's not like they were an adult that said, oh, let me decide to be X, Y, and Z way. Like, at least according to these accounts that people put out there, like that's how they depict it. They say, well, even as a young person, they had this particular orientation. And you see it, like you've seen like these photographs of these people, like these kids, or videos of these kids that are all like a young kid, this a man, a boy or whatever, already very effeminate, just growing up, he's very effeminate or whatever.
That was something happening like traumatic in childhood.
Yeah, because like I'm wondering like if there could be hormonal type of imbalances and stuff like that. You see this like in nature with certain animals that like have an imbalance in their hormones, or even like with certain chemicals that are in the environment that change how, like, for instance, some species of animals behave and stuff like that.
Well, the thing is, up until, and this is just true biologically, psychologically proven, up until about age 12, 11 or 12, it is considered 100% normal and natural for children to have same-sex like. The reason being is they have not been sexualized yet. They have not gone into puberty and actual hormonal change where you have the more of a sexual awareness, the changes in your body, etc. So children are not sexualized unless, and this is why I personally feel like so many homosexuals have been molested, is that unless a child is introduced to sexual trauma in some fashion, be it molestation, be it pornography, be it things like that, unless they've been impacted by that, typically it's considered normal. Because up until, like I said, up until puberty, that's when you go through a change in sexual awareness happens to you during that time. So when people say things like, well, when I was such and such years old, I liked so-and-so. Well, you weren't in a sexual position. Typically, children mirror behavior that they see adults do. They don't necessarily have a mindset that this is a sexual attraction. I want sex with this person. No. And I feel like that in and of itself, when homosexuals say that, I feel like that's heavy, because that's sexualizing children. They're saying that a child has some sexual awareness of the same gender they want to have sex with, and that's not true. When you see young children, they're playing house because they're seeing things that they see mommy and daddy do, they see on TV, and they're kind of mirroring that behavior. So, and not only that, but when some of these people say, oh, when I was 3 and 4, what were you doing at 4 or 5, 3 years old that you still do today? Like, how you're learning, you're growing, you're impacted by your environment. Like, you don't know those type of things till you get to a certain age, and then you begin to pick up things and establish your own personality and things of that nature. So I think sometimes when homosexuals say that, it's a defense mechanism, because biologically and psychologically that doesn't really hold much water. They say that, I think, to try to avoid judgment from people, because then you have to say, well, I guess if you were that young and you like, I mean, think of what you liked when you were a child. You liked some particular toy, or you thought, think of things you thought as a child. You thought when it rained, this or that happened. I mean, to me, that doesn't hold much weight. When people talk about that, it kind of lets me know that there had to be a sexual trauma. Typically, it's a sexual trauma that happens to people that causes a shift. And children under 11 should not be sexualized anyway. They're playing, they're having fun, they have an innocent mind and an innocent body. It's when that becomes violated that they go into a different stage, because now they've been forced into adulthood because they've been sexualized. So, I mean, people can make that case, but to me, I don't necessarily subscribe to that. But I feel like if people are going to get mad about Kevin Hart talking about a sexual choice, then they should be upset at all the jokes he made about people who made a choice to do drugs and ended up being on crack or whatever. They should be mad at all of the things when people choose to do something. And the other thing is this, with the moral thing, it's like, I'm not trying to come from any moral position, because I don't even subscribe to all of that, like in terms of sinning and things of that nature. I just say what they're doing is unnatural, in my opinion. And, if you have to support two men or two women being together and saying that is equivalent to a man and woman, which is what we have through same-sex marriage, then you should also allow incest. And that is between adult people. If it's two adult people, let's say it's mother and son, but they're both adults and they choose to be together, well, that should be allowed. If prostitution should be allowed, because it's two adult people. It's the adult woman who's the prostitute and the adult male or whoever who's getting with the prostitute. See, it's a slippery slope whenever you open the door to this one thing, because it can open the door to everything else. Because who's to judge anybody's sexual choice?
Now you got places like NAMBLA trying to push for child pedophilia and everything else. That's next on the
sexuality. Because if I can say with no proof, see, this is why this is dangerous. If somebody can say with no biological scientific proof, I know you said we don't know either way, but that's the point. The burden of proof is on the homosexual. The burden of proof is proving there's a gay gene, because everybody on this earth and who's lived, we all know we came from a man and woman together. So the proof would have to be on people who are homosexuals for that information to come out, and it has not been proven. So it's a dangerous thing to then say, well, I'm a homosexual and I like this other gender and this is natural for me. So then if somebody says, hey, it's natural for me to like children, I can't help it. I was born this way. I like children and I'm an adult. What then? Is that okay?
No, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I think that, I just think that you're stretching it and trying to, draw parallels to these other things that are different. But, my whole thing is like, the one thing that I want to ask y'all is, do y'all know, are there any homosexuals that you know or whatever, or in your family? And would you be okay with somebody calling them fags or calling them dykes or, denying them an opportunity to have a job based on their sexual preference or their sexual orientation?
Well, I'm just like I said about feminism and everything else, I'm all for equal rights. I don't feel like they should be denied jobs or places in the spots.
Or harassment, harassment, should they be harassment?
As far as the name calling goes, again, It's a lifestyle because they could easily choose not to be gay and they won't get called those names anymore. Like,
yeah, see, that's like an assumption.
When you
though,
say
like,
these things, when I
that's
hear
an
slurs,
assumption that they
like
can-
when I attach slurs to something, these are like names that people call people that are things that they can't change. You know, like when people like referring to race, like you can't change or help what race you are.
So
You know,
think that these gay people, like, you think they can just change who they are and like be straight? Like, because like, I mean, you seen, for instance, that example, that flaming gay guy that was like at some church, and he was like, I'm saved, and I love women and all that stuff. Like, do you like really think that guy was like changed? Like, do you really think
probably not.
that
Probably
those people are changing who they are? Like, even those people,
but they do have that option.
Like, do you really think that they're changing? Like, did they change? Like these women, for instance, that are real butch type, you know, like they're real masculine or whatever. You know, like
I mean, it could happen. It could happen more times than not. It probably wouldn't, but it could.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, like,
the choice is there. Like the choice is there. You know, like
that's the thing. Like, I really wonder about that. Like, if they really have a choice, like the way a lot of and I know what you're like. Miss Legit made some good points about like the sexual trauma that some of them go through. Like, there are many documented cases of a lot of these homosexuals that have been sexually abused as children. So that's something that can't be denied. But you also have a lot of them that weren't abused as children, you know, that end up homosexual. And then like some of these people, they seem like that's who they are. Like, they are like, some of these women are ultra masculine, and it's like to even see them in a heterosexual relationship is like them being in something that's really not natural for them the way they are. So it just raises a lot of questions. Like, I mean, like that prime example, that gay guy, that's one thing that stands out. That gay guy that was like at some church and this pastor prayed over him, and he's like ultra feminine, super gay, and flaming on fire, like, despite like him saying, well, I'm saved.
Doing drugs?
What was that?
Do you think people can stop doing drugs?
Yeah, but people can stop doing drugs, but I think that's
pleasure-seeking thing, right?
Like, how many documented cases do you have of like people that fundamentally change their sexual orientation in a real way, not in a cosmetic way where they're trying to pretend to be straight or whatever? Like, I mean, we know that happens. Like, for instance, in the Black community, we know about the down low people and all that stuff.
Do they have any gay detoxes? Like, do they have any?
Well, they said that's unlawful, I think.
They need gay rehabs. We need to experiment with this. Let's see if it works. I mean, you can't knock it till you try it.
But you do have those, you had those religious fanatics that do that stuff. Like, they have indoctrination camps where they're trying to get them off of being gay, just like you get people off of drugs and stuff like that. And it's questionable whether or not any of that stuff works, man. Like whether or not there's any kind of scientific backing for this stuff. Like, I'm just not aware of any studies that prove that that's something that's real, that they can actually change their orientation and stuff, man. But I'm just going to the question, would you for loved ones that you know that are homosexual, or just people that you know, do you think they should be called fags and dykes, and should they be treated, harassed because they made a lifestyle choice or whatever?
If it was somebody in my family, I mean, of course, I ain't gonna want to see them get disrespected, but it'd be hard for me really to say, but so much, because again, the way I view the whole gay thing is it's a lifestyle. Like, I feel like, well, you kind of chose this, it'd be if somebody was doing something else, it ain't even gotta be gay or something. It could be let's go with the crackhead thing,
I know a homosexual.
I had a couple of people in my family that was on crack before.
I know people that are listening.
They called them crackheads. I didn't like that they was calling them crackheads.
Right. But that's what they were. I'm sure it's a lot of the homosexuals that may be listening to this is they literally comparing being a homosexual to being a crackhead and stuff. Or
they both choices.
But I'm saying that they're both. The reason why I make the comparison is because they're both choices and they're both pleasure seeking.
But you don't know, the homosexual, you don't know for certainty that it's a choice. There's no nothing scientific
But
nailing that down.
Okay, so let me give you an example. I'm a heterosexual woman, right? But me engaging sexually with a man is still a choice. I still am choosing to go have sex with a man, even though naturally I'm attracted to men. That's my point. That's my point that I'm trying to make. Why? Because it's pleasurable to me to have sex with a man. So when people say like, would they choose this? But they're not necessarily choosing that. They're more so choosing their own pleasure. They're more so choosing something that's pleasurable to them, that feels good to them. So I think that's the point I'm trying to make, like about somebody who's on crack as well. It becomes an addiction, yes, but also it's something that's pleasurable to them. It's something that they personally enjoy. So the homosexuals who are involving in this particular actions are it's pleasure. It's pleasure to them. It makes them feel good. It's what they want to do. And so my thing is that, again, if you're going to feel that way about homosexuals, then people need to feel that way about people who are on drugs. They shouldn't be made fun of either for their choices.
And I can even argue that smoking crack is safer than gay sex. I can even make that argument.
But then I was just going to say, too, to answer your question about my family, I just want to be clear. Like, I do not hate homosexual people or anything of that nature. I do not support them being abused. I don't support them being attacked. I don't support them being name called. I don't support anything like that. And I also wouldn't support that for a family member, like I said, who was on crack or something like that. I wouldn't support anybody coming up calling them a crackhead or disrespecting them or belittling them, because I don't support that either way. And I don't think, my thing is like, why isn't a person's sexuality private anyway? Why does it have to be where this is forced down our throat with the whole rainbow thing? It's thrown in people's faces what people do privately. Then homosexuals get upset when people have feelings against it, but you're making the choice to push it in people's face. It's not like being Black. I can't hide being a Black woman. If I go in for a job interview, they're going to know this is a Black woman. If you go in for a job interview, they don't have to necessarily know that you're a homosexual. And homosexuals always make the case that, oh, not every homosexual, like men, are effeminate and this and that. Okay, then. So then why does this have to be something that becomes prioritized? Why does who you like to lay down with become a priority for me when my race is my heritage, my ancestry is in my blood, in my DNA? It's unmutable, it's unchangeable. Why does that become equivalent to what I am? And I think that what people also don't understand about this whole thing is they've normalized. See, this is what I'm saying, is like homosexuals were not seeking tolerance. They weren't seeking acceptance. They're seeking control. And so like in this case with Kevin Hart, although he has apologized, they want to make him completely bow down to them. And this is all because most of these are men who like to sleep with men. And they want you to accept that they are men and they want to screw men. Why do I have to accept that? Now, I apologize for calling names. I apologize for saying something was offensive. But I'm moving on. That's your sexual proclivity. That's your sexual pleasure and preference. That's what you like to do in the bedroom. Why is that projected on me? And why is that made equivalent to my race?
Yeah, and did you see the tweet that one of those gay people left after Kevin Hart said what he said? He was like, yeah, Kevin Hart apologized the first time, but that isn't good enough. He needs to do more. He needs to support the LGBT community and blah, 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 some more other stuff at the end of it. It's like, whoa, wait. So he has to support the LGBT community for you guys to get off his neck? Like, so that's the only... So he has to subscribe to the whole gay agenda. That anything less than that is unacceptable. That's pretty much what they were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. Like, my whole thing is like, I don't think he should have to like go out here and endorse that stuff. Like, it's just a matter. Like, for me, like, I just think he could have, like, the best thing he could have done is just like, it doesn't hurt somebody to say, well, I apologize if this hurt y'all feelings. Like, even though like there's a lot of, I mean, it wouldn't hurt him at all to apologize again, like for those people that didn't know about this stuff and it just came to their attention recently. It couldn't hurt him to just apologize, and I think to just leave it at that. Like, I wouldn't say he should go out here being some gay rights activist or any of that stuff. You know, just a simple apology saying like, you know, about the terminology or like how he said things.
But he did
like,
apologize.
I don't think that people have to endorse that particular lifestyle or anything like that. My whole thing is just against discrimination and against the use of slurs against people. That's my only thing.
But that's what I'm saying. We have to realize what we're talking about is sex. That's what we're really talking about. Is that I have to accept who you want to lay down with. That's ultimately what this whole thing is. And I don't understand why that's even on the table. I don't advocate for, like I said, anybody being discriminated against, but I felt like homosexual, quote unquote, discrimination should be its own separate thing. That should not be connected or lumped in with race.
Yeah, it is separate. Like legally is separate. Like they consider, like for instance, like if there's a, you know, in the law they have like these different categories of classification, and like they have different standards. Like for instance, like if there's a, you know, some kind of law or whatever, or policy that treats people differently based on race, that's subjected to like you know, strict scrutiny under the law.
Right.
That kind of thing is strictly scrutinized, whereas like gender or sexual orientation, that's subjected to like an intermediate type of scrutiny. And then like the lowest level is like rational basis type of classifications. So it's like, it's not treated the same as race, like in terms of like the level of scrutiny that it receives, but it's still like, you know, a classification under the law that's subjected to some kind of scrutiny, you know, but it's not to the same degree. So even the law acknowledges that there's a difference between like race and like sexual orientation. So, you know, I'm not saying that they both are the same or anything like that. You know, my point is that the whole issue about whether or not it's like some choice or whether or not like people are born that way, that's something that's up for debate. Like I haven't seen anything definitive like one way or the other. And if I'm incorrect, like somebody correct me, like you all could post comments in either in the chat room with actual sources or in the comment section, you know, post some actual sources proving one way or the other the case. You know, I really frankly challenge people to do so. And my whole thing, like usually, like I'm on a complete opposite, like of this issue. Like, you know, for instance, like, you know, when people were pushing this same-sex marriage, I was against it. Like I wrote a written blog on my, you know, I had a written blog before I had this YouTube channel where I was talking about like this whole thing and how I was opposed to it. So usually, you know, I'm against that particular type of, you know, that issue.
I actually didn't have,
even though like I hear, you know, I had that same position, you know, the same position that you were even agreeing to, Ms. Legit, like about like discrimination. Like I still like people shouldn't be discriminated against or harassed.
Absolutely.
But I wasn't with the same-sex marriage and even like the idea of like promoting homosexuality like in films and like normalizing it. Like that's something that I don't agree with. Like I don't agree with the lifestyle, but you know, part of the thing is like I just haven't seen anything like definitive one way or the other, you know, proving that this is like purely a choice versus like some kind of you know, some kind of characteristic that people are born with or some kind of trait based on imbalances and all that stuff.
Now, you know what's funny is me personally, I didn't have a problem with this same-sex thing. I don't really care. You know, like I can care less. They are, the way I see it, they're gonna be sleeping together anyway. What difference do it make if they got a ring on it or not? I don't care. To me, that was a religious argument for the most part. In my position.
Well, if you don't care about that,
Well,
like
I didn't
care about this other stuff. Then. Like I mean,
I don't care if they get married. I mean, if they get married, they go ahead. I mean, because my whole thing, I don't think they should be doing it, period. But if they're going to do it, I mean, what difference do it make if they married or not? If they do it, like that's just paperwork for me, the way I see it. Like,
well, to me, I the only reason I disagree with that is because marriage and things like that help to establish societal norms. And with same-sex marriage becoming legalized, what a lot of people did not realize is that within the public school system, it becomes mandated that children starting in kindergarten are taught these things and introduced to them as being normal, natural, and healthy. And so this is why now in a lot of schools, when they use this term diversity, they include homosexuality in that. Because part of it is because same-sex marriage has been legal, federalized, and so it has to be seen equivalent to a man and woman, mommy and daddy, what children understand, and that this is normal, natural, and healthy. So to me, that's one of the biggest problems I had with homosexual marriages, because it helps to establish societal norms that children are going to be taught and brought up with as being the same as a man and woman, and it's not the same as a man and woman. And it's been tons of proof and evidence that shows that when something is legalized within a society, you see an uptick in it. You see a higher level of it being created because now it's been established as a norm. It's a norm, it's normal, it's a law. Hey, it's the same thing. And so when people now, like when you do paperwork and stuff, a lot of places, especially with school and things like that, if you notice, the paperwork will say parent 1, parent 2. They changed the whole scheme of having mother and father, all because now same-sex marriage is legalized. So there is no difference and no distinguishment made between the two. But I wanted to say this real quick. And the reason why I know a lot about this is because I studied on this. I used to debate on this. I used to go in on this. And these homosexual people went crazy after me. But a good book to read to have a better understanding of what's going on is a book called After the Ball. It's by Marshall Kirk. And the book basically talks about how I'm trying to remember the whole title. Okay, the whole title is After the Ball, How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of Gays in the 90s. Now, this book was written in the 1980s. And basically what happened is it was a gathering of all the top homosexuals in different industries, in the gay organizations, those who had money, power, influence. And it was a big, huge meeting between all of these people as to how they would take homosexuality to the next level. And so their whole thing is they wanted to kind of like overhaul the whole idea of straight things, straightness in America. And people don't realize the homosexuals had a 6-point plan in terms of how that they were going to basically take over in a sense. And so just to give you their bullet points real quick, their first thing was to talk about gays. And actually this is stuff that we can actually use, because I think I did like something on this before. This was some years ago, breaking this down. But these points are some of the points we can use as Black people. But their step 1, talk about gays and gayness as loudly and as often as possible. They say this is what the author said, almost any behavior begins to look normal if you are exposed to it enough. The way to benub raw sensitivities about homosexuality is to have a lot of people talk a great deal about the subject in a neutral or supportive way. Constant talk builds the impression that public opinion is at least divided on the subject, and that a sizable segment accepts or even practices homosexuality. Step 2. These people are very cunning. Let me say that. Step 2. Portray gays as victims and not as aggressive challengers. In any campaign to win over the public, gays must be cast as victims in need of protection. Of course, this does not address the issue of whether the gay lifestyle is right or wrong. It is an attempt to emotionally manipulate others with the motive of getting them to accept values they otherwise wouldn't agree with. Step 3, give protectors a just cause. A media campaign that casts gays as society's victims and encourages straights to be their protectors must make it easier for those to respond to assert, and explain their new protectiveness. Few straight women and even fewer straight men will want to defend homosexuality boldly as such. Our campaign should not demand direct support for homosexual practices, but should instead take anti-discrimination as its theme. Step 4, make gays look good. In order to make a gay victim sympathetic to straights, you have to portray him as every man. But an additional theme of the campaign should be more aggressive and upbeat. To offset the increasingly bad press that these times have brought to homosexual men and women, the campaign should paint gays as superior pillars of society. Step 5, make the victimizers look bad. At a later stage of the media campaign for gay rights, it will be time to get tough with remaining opponents. To be blunt, they must be vilified. Our goal here is twofold. First, we seek to replace the mainstream's self-righteous pride about its homophobia with shame and guilt. Second, we intend to make the anti-gays look so nasty that average Americans will want to dissociate themselves from such types. Points, this is the last point, step 6. All of these points, they super go into detail, but I'm just reading a little bit about it. Step 6, solicit funds. The buck stops here. Any massive campaign of this kind would require unprecedented expenditures for months or even years, an unprecedented fundraising drive. So, yes, yes, those were the 6 points. And they said on that point, because some straightforward appeals are impossible, the National Gay Task Force has had to cultivate quiet backroom liaisons with broadcast companies and newsrooms in order to make sure that issues important to the gay community receive coverage. So, mind you, just think about it. This was written in the 80s, and look where we are today. And tell me all of those points aren't in play.
Yeah, it sounds like that sounds exactly right. No.
That's what I'm telling people when they say there's no gay agenda. Actually, there is. There actually is a real agenda. They have a 6-point plan, and then there's another plan in the book. I can't remember, but it's like another 4 points or 3 points or something. But yeah, so this is what they've been able to do. And then I think the number 5 one I read directly impacts the Kevin Hart situation. Make victimizers look bad. You want to make them bow down, basically. So.
Yeah, and the truth, that's agenda sounds like that's exactly what's going on right now. But it's like every group should have an agenda. Every single interest group should have an agenda and push that agenda. But what you're saying is valid. That plan seems like everything that we've seen unfold over the past few years, like in terms of how they got same-sex marriage to be the law of the land, just the whole approach that they used in that area. And then like the way you see the normalization of homosexuality on television and stuff and in the movies, like in just about every television show you have a gay character, and just about a lot of movies you have gay characters and stuff like that. So it is becoming more and more normalized in the society, and that's because of that agenda that you're talking about. So those are valid points, but like any group should be about promoting their agenda, advancing whatever their interests are. And they just like we would push against somebody that made anti-Black statements, they have every right under the law to try to use their efforts to lobby government or to pressure people, just like any other group, whether we're talking about corporations or the gun control groups or the pro-gun rights people or just any other interest group.
Right, but just don't get lost that ultimately what we're talking about again is a sexual preference, not a racial group, not people who are disabled,
Yeah, it's a sexual
preference.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. But yeah, I want to thank y'all for joining this hangout. It was a great discussion. We need to do this more often.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, do y'all have any other points y'all want to make before we close out?
Renee?
No. Thank you, New Possibilities, and I appreciate what you do. And you try to give a very balanced perspective on a lot of different things, and I just really appreciate that. With so much going on, we need more and more Black media from our perspective in breaking things down. So I just wanted to say thank you for that, and that's it.
All right, thanks everybody.
Definitely, yeah. Appreciate you having us on. Like you said, we gotta do this more often. Good to have a think tank going where we bouncing ideas off each other and people aren't getting emotional. That's always a good thing.
All right, well, good night, everybody. Please rate, comment, and subscribe. Peace.